All right, Frank Root back with you here in the TLR build studio, and we got for me, pretty exciting part of the build. I've done bag J or the last bag before that includes the wheels and electronics mounting and stuff, but I've never done it to this level. And what I mean by that is we're going to go ahead and we're going to install all the electronics and we're going to mount tires. We're really going to get this car ready to hit the track, and I'm going to shorten the wires. I'm going to put a transponder in. I'm going to do everything the way that I build the car to actually go on the track, not the shortcut version, not the easy version. And this video is going to be a little bit longer. I'm guessing it's going to be at least an hour and a half, but I have Ryan Stiles Harris with me to work with me on this video. Hey Ryan, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
So we got, I think, a pretty exciting video going on. We're going to go all the way with it. And I think that's something that I haven't really seen before.
All the way. I love it. Let's do it.
So I'm going to go ahead and let Ryan give you guys a quick wrap on how he has his setup in his 22X-4 while I go ahead and get this feed shared across a few different platforms.
Ooh, sounds good. Actually, you know what? I'm going to grab mine and I'm just going to hold it up in front of the camera and I'll try and point and talk to it at the same time. Here we go. Oh, yeah. Hoping everybody else is getting their 22X4s as soon as possible. Okay. This part of the process, I'll be honest, I'll give my car right now like a 7 out of 10. Like I could tidy up the wiring just a little bit, but it looks pretty clean. Got the colors all going in one direction, you know. Got to get the factory look going on so that if I squid out on the track, at least I look fast back in the pits, right? So it's pretty straightforward, like most four-wheel cars out there today. Got the motor over here on the driver's side, battery over here. And then something that I tried new to kind of cut down on weight and just to make sure that I'm getting the fan to work as well as possible and there's not a bunch of extra clunky wiring going on in here, is I hardwire the fan directly to my ESC on the back of it. And I don't know, Frank, are we going to do that today with yours or not?
Yeah, we are. We're going to hardwire. Couple reasons. One, I'm using a 6240 servo, which has it's a receiver and a servo combined.
Okay.
It only has one auxiliary port, which I'm going to use for the transponder.
Okay.
But also, when we hardwire, we get more voltage. We get a higher voltage going to the fan, and you get more RPM out of the fan, and you get a cooler motor for it.
Okay. All right. I like that. So, Frank, coming in with the pro tips. So the only thing there, if you've never done that before, so as soon as you plug in both of these terminals on your battery, that means that your fan is going to be hot or it's going to be getting voltage. So the way that you turn that fan off, or the only way to turn it off, is if you unplug the battery completely. So for those of you out there that don't have to do that and you don't really like that feature, that's just something to know. So I don't want you to go through the process of snipping off a lead on your fan and then saying, hey, why doesn't it turn off? That's why. It's not going to turn on and off anymore with the ESC. So just so you know. Let's see, what else do we need to know here? One thing I noticed when Dakota was wiring up his car and he put the receiver, he kind of puts it way out here on the outside edge, and then he kind of leaves this middle area open for some ballast options. I've seen him play around with a couple different things. So if you guys are mounting up your electronics and you don't know where to put the receiver, and you have one of these little like micro ones from Sanwa or Futaba or whatever, that's a good place to start and put it. Frank, have you put your receiver anywhere else, or has that been where you put yours?
Yeah, I put mine there. One of the reasons I put it there is because it seems to stick the best out there, because you're not servo taping it to like over any of the cutouts in the chassis.
Okay.
So, yep.
Cool. One thing I really like about the wiring of the kind of like the leads that come off of the ESC. I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm sure you've seen pictures online, but it's nice little like just this little plastic collector right here. It just kind of keeps the wires from getting anywhere near the spur gear. it's a nice little touch. It's nothing, revolutionary, but I like that it's there, so I don't have to worry about if I take a hard crash or something like that, that my gear is gonna grab those wires and chew it up. So when you build it, make sure you put that little guy on there. I know it might be easy to get lost if you're not paying attention to your parts on the table there, but let's see. Other things to note as far as the wiring. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Nothing new or different. I would definitely make sure that when you are assembling it, make sure you do run your wires under the channels. This is really, I don't think I could show this on my camera right now because it's like way down in there. But down underneath this brace, there's going to be a channel for your ESC wire or any wires that are coming from this side to cross over to the receiver. So make sure that you take the time to route those carefully. And then I would say make sure if you're, tighten everything down, that you're not clamping down onto those wires or anything like that. There's plenty of space in there. You should be able to run a couple wires through there, no problem. But just make sure you take your time. Don't want to cramp anything and end up, short circuiting something and blowing up some electronics when it just takes just a little, little extra moment there. Get it all dialed in. But yeah, looks really clean. I'm really happy with it.
Awesome. So I switched to some AirPods. You got good audio on me, Ryan?
I can hear you. It sounds a little bit more muffled, but if that's what you need to do, then go for it, man.
Any better?
That's a little bit better. Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's rock this. So we're gonna go ahead and get started now. Now we got bag J. It's the last bag of the build. But as you can see, I have quite a few other things out here. You need a speed controller, a battery, a motor. I got some tire glue and some tires from Proline, Spectrum, receiver and servo in one, or you're going to need a receiver and a servo. I have a motor fan here, 150 millimeter sensor wire. I have a harness here for the fan, some shrink wrap, a personal transponder. I have a plug. I'm going to shorten the wire on my speed controller, so I have a plug for that. I have some 5 millimeter bullets, and your bullets are going to need to match your battery. So I have some Motive 5 millimeter bullets that match my Motive battery. I do have an aluminum servo horn here. It's one of my most recommended parts in terms of upgrades for the 22X-4. I would definitely recommend an aluminum servo horn. The only reason it's not included in the kit is that we can't include both since there's two different sizes. So I have a 23 tooth, which is what fits my Spectrum servo properly. And then I also have the carbon electronics mounting plate here, and definitely a nice part to have. You don't have to have it, but it's in terms of working on and maintaining your car, it is really nice to have the Speedo mounted to this plate because you can pull it out really easily. All right, so I still have my instruction manual here. I just kind of pulled it off the table for a minute, and we are on bag. Let's see, I didn't use the last couple pages, so we are on bag J here. And we're going to go ahead and get started by mounting in the servo. I'm going to set this off to the side, and I'm gonna move most of these things out of the way. I just wanted everybody to get a chance to see what we're going to be working with. And I'll go ahead and set these off to the side until we need each of them.
What turn motor?
We're going to start with the servo.
Just curious.
Yeah, I got a 5.5.
Okay.
What I've found for me is we have a 6.5 and a 5.5 in the Motive brand, and the 6.5 isn't quite enough for some tracks, and the 5.5 is a lot for some tracks. So what I've been running is a 5.5 with a 12 mil rotor. So it kind of smooths the power of the 5.5 out on the low end, but it still has really good top end, and it's just been a really good balance of power for me. So I got a pinion. Oh, I also have a 19 tooth pinion gear there. So TLR aluminum pinion gear. So first step here, go ahead and get started. We have our wheels. I'm gonna go ahead and set those off to the side for now. And then we have bags J1, J2, J3, and J4. We're just gonna do this in order, and it should be pretty straightforward. So I'm gonna go ahead and open J1. And I am going to use a pit towel here. Normally at this stage of the process, I probably wouldn't be using this pit towel anymore, but I think for you guys, it probably helps you to be able to see everything, especially with the camera further away. And we're going to go ahead and assemble this servo mount. So in the kit, we include the molded servo horns. We have the, there's a 1 dot, a 2 dot, a 3 dot, and there's a chart in the manual that says what each one matches with. So the 23 tooth is 1 dot, 24 tooth is 2 dot, and 25 tooth is 3 dot. So depending on what servo you use, you'll have a different spline size. I'm actually going to set those off to the side because we're going to use this aluminum mount. So I'm going to go ahead and open that now. And I'm going to take our ball stud here for steering, and I'm definitely going to clean this ball stud, try to get the oil off of it. I'm going to spray a little bit of brake clean here on the rag, and then just kind of pull the ball stud, like unscrew it basically, threads out, and you can see there was no mark here before, so it's just all the oil that came off of it. And then grab the thread lock here, and I always thread lock this ball stud that goes into the servo horn, but otherwise it pretty much is guaranteed to come loose. And now the 22X-4 horn is a little bit different, where the ball stud comes out as the same side as the spline. So the ball stud actually comes back and goes over the top of the servo. On the 2-wheel, traditionally, the ball stud actually comes out the front of the servo. So it is a different servo horn. And that is why, because the location of the ball stud is different and the spacing of that's different. And then you need a 1.5 here to go ahead and thread into the clamping section. I just get it started. And then what I do is I actually put the servo horn kind of loosely on, and I turn it all the way this way. And then you basically will find that if you turn it all the way to full lock and then you go just one above where it's level, that's usually going to be centered. And I feel really confident about that. This is how I usually put my servos on. I usually don't have to feel like I need to power them up before I install them when using this method. So, and then I'm going to clean the screw that's going to hold the servo horn on also and thread lock that. What servos have you been running, Ryan?
I've been running the BK Shorty servos, and I was actually just about to say, I'm surprised that you're not installing this with that nifty little
Ryan,
option
do you have
part.
your audio on?
Yo, yeah, can you hear me? I'm here. Did you lose me?
Okay, try again.
One sec, guys. Oh. I hear you.
All right. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you for sure. Audio. It's one of the.
Nope, nothing.
I can hear you. Yes. Now I can't.
Technical difficulties.
Sorry, guys. Doing our best here. You can
We'll
never.
get it all sorted out. We're using a new program and some new devices, so it's gonna be a little bit of a learning curve here while we get everything set up. So sorry about that. Let's
Guys,
try this.
we got to give him some kudos here because he's really using this program to like the maximum of its abilities. So we got to give some likes, give some love to Frank in the chat. The multicam action, sorting out the audio. He's working hard for you guys.
Trying to. Can you hear me now, Ryan?
I can, yes, sir.
All right. We're gonna get a real quick echo here for 1 sec. Hold on 1 sec.
Everybody hold your nose. Hey, everybody dumping some likes into the stream for you, Frank. They're sending all the love and positivity to you.
And you can hear me okay now?
I can hear you. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, let's just stick without the AirPods because I think that jammed us up.
You're just getting too fancy on us, Frank.
I know. All right. So I asked, and I couldn't hear, but I think you gave the answer. What servos have you been running?
Running the BK servos, the shorty ones, which I know they're not the Spectrum brand there. but they do look pretty good. They got the black and silver trim to match everything to the TLR it's got going on there.
Okay.
But I was about to say that I'm surprised. I know we're building this like right out of the box, but a nice little upgrade that you can do and I can't is that nice little servo mount that's like literally a part of the servo, right?
Yeah. So I don't have an extra one of those, which is why I'm not installing it now. But I will show really quick. I'll show my race kit, which does have it on there just so people can see for reference. All right, we'll show this. So we have this servo here has a mount that basically replaces this B plate, goes over and then mounts to the chassis. So it removes the entire mounting harness, the aluminum plate, the carbon plate, and the need for all the fasteners. So it's really nice, really clean, and it does work with the Spectrum 6240 servo, or whether it's the RX or the standard, the 2-in-1 or the standard. But yeah, it's really, really nice upgrade. And like I said, you can only use it with the Spectrum servo, but the Spectrum servos work really good. So it's a good reason to have one.
Nice. It looks clean. I like it.
Yeah. So now we have the servo horn on. I'm going to go ahead and all of these screws are going into aluminum, and I'm going to thread lock all of them, and I'm going to clean all of them. So I'm just going to clean them all here real quick.
All of my microfiber towels look like those from whether it's mounting up electronics or cleaning tires or something. I don't think I always have to go out and buy new ones if I want to look like fresh and clean.
Yeah, I'm the same. My wife won't let me put them in the wash. So
Oh, true.
when they get dirty, they done.
Yeah, shock oil or diff oil or who knows. Yeah, get that into the washer and we'll both be in the doghouse for sure.
Yeah. So I have I have like a drawer of new ones, and then I have a drawer of ones that are used but not destroyed yet. So if I'm gonna I don't know, empty out some 500K onto a shop towel, I'll pull out one of those and just finish it off.
You know, I really like using those blue shop towels for when I do the like nasty diff building stuff. If I have some, those things are really nice because then you just they last long enough to do the project, and you just throw them away. They're really nice.
Yep. All right, so I cleaned all those screws. We got all that sorted. So there's what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all of the parts started, kind of snug, and then there's a certain order that I tighten everything down in that helps, I think, keep everything square. So I'm going to start with these shorter 6mm screws, and they go through the top of the carbon plate down into the aluminum bulkhead. So you have the aluminum bulkhead that goes on towards the center of the car, so to the left of the servo, and then you have a post that goes to the right. So again, these are like not even snug. Like I basically snug them, then back them off a quarter turn so everything can still move a little bit. And then we got this post over here. Do the same. All right, and then now we're going to just kind of place it around the servo so you can see how pretty much fits there. And you have this nice rectangular shape here. That's where the personal transponder is going to go later. It fits perfect there. But then if you don't run one for whatever reason, it still has a pretty cool look to it. And there's definitely a chamfered edge here on the top that you can see that it's not on the bottom edge. So if you're wondering which way it goes, it's pretty straightforward. Now, you'll notice that there are only 3 washers here, not 4, and that's on purpose. What we do is we're going to put a screw and a washer in 1, 2, 3 of the holes, and then in this 4th hole in the bottom, no washer. If you put a washer on, it will actually hit the center brace on the chassis because we've pushed the limit of how close the servo can be mounted to the center of the chassis. Enough so that the extra overhang of the washer will make it not fit properly.
jumping in, just looking at the chat here, seeing if there's any questions for us. Maybe we can both answer this one. Travis Fisher, he's asking, he asked me, with all my reviews that I've done, what are the features that really stand out to me about the 22X-4 that I've enjoyed? Features that maybe they're not necessarily proprietary to this car, but I really enjoy how quickly we can get in and out of the diffs on race day. So if I'm under a time crunch and I want to freshen up my diff or change something really quick, going into the next round of qualifying, I definitely can. Really easy to do that. And then I think, honestly, one of the things that I really like is that, Frank, you were talking about in a previous video where you guys said we're going to go with what makes the car best for a lot of different reasons. And one of those things was the fact that it doesn't have adjustable diff heights, and you've kind of reduced the number of like shock locations because you really spent the time to figure out what is the best for the car, and then you reinforce it. So it helps me build confidence with the car and know that it already is what it needs to be. And then I can not have to worry about wasting time on stuff like that when I'm probably going to end right back where the kit asked me to put it in the first place. So I like that you guys were so thorough and you took your time to build a really phenomenal race car right out of the box. So that's not necessarily a feature per se, but it's something that I really appreciate, and it helps me just have more confidence with the car. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that. All right, so we have all the screws here kind of keyed in, and they're all almost tight, but they're just snug. So on this, because it's the floating style servo mount, we actually want the servo to be mounted all the way up towards the carbon plate. So I'm actually going to kind of push it up and kind of hold it against the carbon plate. And then the first screw I'm going to tighten is this one here. And what I want to do is bring this plate flush to the aluminum servo. And then I'm going to snug the one underneath it. And then I'm going to go to these top two. And I'm going to snug those. So now I have this corner here kind of all locked in. And then I have this flat surface across the front. I'm going to snug these two here so that this post becomes lined up perfectly with this front aluminum plate and the other plate on the other side. And then I'm just going to tighten this screw on top after it's already in the right orientation by snugging these. So that's kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I'm going to basically go back and just kind of tighten them all now. Did you find something similar when you were building yours, or a different way that worked for you, Ryan?
No, I pretty much exactly the way that you did it, because it made the most sense that it would line up with the other chassis holes and everything like that, and everything was going to be square. So definitely the best way to do it.
Yeah. And on the two-wheel drive car, we want to mount the servo all the way down on the mount to get the most amount of clearance. But on this, we actually want it up so that the chassis can flex underneath the servo without getting into it. So, and you can see the mount here. This is the 2-in-1. So there's the port for the transponder, and then a port for the speed controller. And we have the cutout here in the carbon specifically to work around that. And then obviously, if you're running a standard servo, it fits no problem also. So now we're going to go ahead and install this on the chassis. And you can see here we have 3 holes unused in a row. And that's where the mount fits in, just right like so. And again, we're going to want to go ahead and use thread lock for these screws, which have already been cleaned.
And Frank, I don't know if you had already mentioned it, but I'm assuming you're using standard, just like blue thread lock.
Yeah, the TLR lock that we sell, it's blue, and it seems to work really well for me. I think for 10th scale, there's not really a need that I've run into for anything more substantial like a red or a green.
Got it.
I mean, part of the thing that you need with thread lock, right, is you need it to be you need it to work well in terms of keeping the screws in, but you also need to be able to get the screws out when the time comes. So it is good to have a pretty good balance there And I think that the TLR blue works good for that. All right, so now we got our 3 screws in, and I just kind of get them all started, and then I go ahead and tighten the front, and then the back, and then the middle. Probably doesn't matter at all, but it's just the way that I do it. And then we have our last turnbuckle here left over from our build, and just this one can go either way, but I always put the notch on the driver's side of the car. Well, driver's side for US folk, and these ones I definitely can't get on with my fingers. There's just not enough room around them, so I go ahead and use some pliers. If you put like a piece of paper or a rag or a piece of like plastic header bag, you can go ahead and snap those on without leaving any scratches. But yeah, that's just something that you can do. But I didn't. I just snapped it on. All right, so we got our servo installed now. Now our servo is all together. Got the servo link on there. Now next I'm going to install the motor. So here I have a new MC2 Motive 5.5. And this is the motor that I run personally. And this one has the smaller rotor in it, already pre-built from Paul. So I know that the spacing is good. All the screws are tight. The timing is set to 20 degrees on this, which I'm going to turn it up a little bit because I run with a smaller rotor. I like running my timing about 30 degrees. So it's definitely easier to adjust your timing before you install it in the car than after. So
I don't run much modified stuff, so usually we don't mess around too much with that stuff. It's kind of just like set it where we know the motor works best and then go from there. So it's interesting that that's an adjustment that you'll make.
I think really like once you find what timing works for you, it's more of a feel thing. It's more about like where the power is in the band. Once you find something that works for you, you usually stick pretty close to it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and grab bag J2 here and open that because that actually has the motor mount in it. And we're also going to be putting the battery in soon. You can see that we have the battery strap, foams, and spacers there. And there's the motor mount. So the motor mount, we use these flathead screws to go into the motor. These do not require thread lock. I do not recommend using it. I will still clean the screws to make sure that there's no extra oil on them. In fact, I'm going to give a fresh shot of brake clean there. Move a little bit down the rag, get a clean section of the rag. You can see instantly how it leaves that oil behind. And then, so in the car, right, you want the wires, you want to orient the motor so that the wires and the mounting tabs are kind of on the side. You don't really want them on the top. You can put them on the top. There's not as much room with the body. So what I recommend is you mount them so that the wires come along the side of the motor inside the body. And you can just kind of hold your motor up against the motor plate and have a pretty good idea of how it's going to fit into the car. And then go ahead and install those motor screws.
Frank, if you switch it back to my view, I can show them the angle that I have my motor for reference, what we're going to do.
Yeah, sure.
So if you guys can see the wire angle here, it's just kind of tilted just off to the side. And this may vary just a little bit depending on your particular motor that you have. But definitely you don't want to put them up here on the top because, like you said, the clearance is a little tight and you might get a little bit of rub on your body and scratch away that nice paint job, or the body might not sit correctly. So definitely just kind of shift it off to the side there and you'll be good to go.
All right, so I have the mount on. Now what I'm going to do is I actually have my, it's a 19 tooth TLR aluminum pinion here. And so I'm going to actually install this before I put the motor in the car. But I'm just going to like set it flush, and it's not the final setting, so I'm not going to crank down on it. I want to set it after I have it in the car, but it's definitely easier to get it started when you have it out of the car. So you go ahead and take the mount and slide it in, and it'll basically slide in nice and easy there. And then we're going to take our flathead or button head screws here, and again, a little bit of brake clean these screws off. And I'm not going to use thread lock on these. I have not had issues with them coming loose. And we're going to use a 1 mil aluminum washer here. And you definitely can use thread lock here, but I haven't felt the need to, so I don't. So basically, I'm just going to snug these down and then back them off like a half turn. All right, so now we have our motor here. And what we want to look for is we want the spur gear and the pinion gear to be aligned so we get maximum tooth contact. And you can see that right now the pinion gear is a little bit forward. And this is why I mentioned that we're not really tightening it down yet because we want to make sure that everything is in alignment. And you can see that there is a slot right here in the motor mount. And that's so that you can get your wrench in there and tighten the pinion gear. So you just go ahead and rotate the pinion gear until the tooth or the set screw lines up with that slot. You can back it down and line it up and then tighten that pinion gear down good so that it won't come out. And now you can see how the alignment is improved. So now you have the pinion gear, full tooth of the pinion gear contacting the full tooth of the spur gear. And then now we're just going to slide it in and set our gear mesh. And what I do is I tighten it all the way or push it all the way in so that there's no backlash. And then I push it out a little bit until I feel a little bit of backlash. And I'm pushing the motor down with my hand, kind of holding the mount so that it doesn't move. And I'm going to check all the way around the gear. I'm going to check, make sure that I have a little bit of backlash. I'm going to tighten down the top screw, then the bottom screw, and I just kind of snug them and then tighten them. And now I'm going to go check it again after everything's tight. Sometimes when you tighten the motor mount, it'll move the mesh just a little bit. So like there's a little bit of backlash, but I want just a little bit more. I'd feel a little bit more comfortable with just a little smidge more backlash. You want to try and get as little as possible without having too much. And that feels pretty good to me. So I'll pull it up here closer to the camera so I can kind of show you. And again, this is kind of off of a feel. I mean, this is more of a feel thing. You can kind of see there's a little movement, and then you just kind of spin it around. You want to these molded gears aren't going to be 100% perfectly round, so you want to definitely check multiple places around. There's going to be a slightly tighter spot, a slightly looser spot. So you kind of want to get an average of all the different spots around the spur gear. Pretty similar to how you set yours, Ryan?
Absolutely. First thing I do is I find the quote unquote high spot or the tight spot in the gear, and I kind of set the backlash to 0, if there was a thing, to that point, and then I make sure that is the tight point, and then I back it off just a tiny bit from that point. Check it all, make sure there's no major slack or anything like that, and then you're good to go.
Cool. All right, so we're gonna do the battery install now. It's kind of the next step here in the process. And so what we have is there's a couple different options as far as like you can run a thin battery like this Motive 4100, or you can run a full-size battery. So this is a Motive 6000. So you can see the difference. There's also a difference in weight, and the weight is the reason that I prefer to run the thin battery. If we're running spec racing, sometimes you'll run the bigger battery. Gives a little bit more power, but you are carrying a little bit more weight. So you have to, adjust the suspension for such. And what I do is I run the thin battery. The difference, there is also a difference between the thick battery and the thin battery in terms of the overall length is a few millimeters different. You can kind of tell here at the back. And because of that, we've made a few different spacers. So what we have here is we have a thin spacer, which has 1 dot. And then we have a thick spacer that has 3 dots. And you have another thin spacer with 1 dot. So if you're using a standard size battery, you can run a thin spacer in the front and a thin spacer in the back. It's going to fit in there nice and perfect. Or you can run a thick spacer in the front or the back and the battery all the way to the mount. But with this thin pack, there's actually a little bit of space left. So in your tuning parts bag, you're actually going to have a medium spacer, which is the 2-dot spacer. I'm going to go ahead and pull that out because we're going to use it. And this spacer works with one of the number 1 spacers. So you use a 1 and a 2. And with these thin packs, that actually gets me to where I have a really pretty good snuggish fit here. And I'll just go ahead and lay that down and hold it up so you can see. Now you really don't have a gap either in the front or the back. So depending on what batteries you run, you might need to run 2 number 1s or a number 1 and a number 2. So just kind of, if you feel like you have a big gap, try and fit the number 2 spacer. If it fits, it fits. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. I know Dakota runs the Trinity batteries, and they use 2 number 1 spacers for theirs.
Yeah, I was just about to hold up my car and say, I have a Trinity battery, and I have 1 and 1.
Yeah, perfect.
Yep.
So now I have those spacers in there. There's a little short button head screw that just goes in to hold those spacers in place. It doesn't really do anything than just keep them from falling out. So definitely don't need to like torque down on them or get crazy. And where's my other screw? There it is.
Now, Frank, I got a question for you.
Sure.
So I think, because I've never asked anyone, that there is a deliberate science, if you will, as to why you went with the kind of elastic band method versus like a stiff carbon fiber like brace. Did you guys do that intentionally with this car?
Yeah, we did. I think so. The biggest thing that we wanted was ultimate adjustability and ease of use in terms of taking the battery in and out. And then I think that there's benefits to the way that the chassis flex works too. So, I mean, the first thing is you have every battery is a little bit different, right? Like almost no 2 batteries are exactly the same dimensions. They're a 0.5 millimeter shorter, a 0.5 millimeter longer, a 1/4 millimeter narrower, or whatever. They're, you can measure 30 batteries and not have one dimension that matches between any of the batteries. And really that's because the rules for most of the sizes are a maximum and not a minimum. There's no minimum. So everybody just tries to go to the maximum, but they don't want to push the limit too much. So they undersize it a little bit here and a little bit there. And kind of everybody ends up with something different. So because of that, when you use the elastomer band, the difference in size is just taken up by the stretch of the band. So if you run a thin pack, if you run a thick pack, if you want to add, a brass plate under it that's a millimeter thick, then all of a sudden, you have to loosen some fasteners and unscrew them a millimeter and kind of get everything to fit. And then if you're using like a carbon brace, you're also stiffening the chassis from point to point, let's say, and you don't have that stiffening brace on the other side. So
right.
The elastomer band, I mean, it is going to have a little bit of pull to it. So it is going to be a little bit stiffer, but when the car needs to flex, it's just going to flex that rubber. So it's, I think, more compliant that way. And even on like our 2-wheel drive car, I prefer to run the molded braces over the carbon brace, just because it doesn't tie in the 2 mud guards and it allows more flex between in the middle of the chassis. So yeah, that was the reason. And obviously you'll see right here how quick and easy it is to install. So you guys will notice that we actually have 2 different elastomer bands come in the kit. One's a little bit shorter, one's a little bit longer. And the shorter one is for a thin battery and the longer one is for a thick battery. You can run either with both batteries, but if you run the long one with a thin battery and you have a really hard crash, the battery could possibly come dislodged. So we made a smaller one. And you basically, it's pretty straightforward. You just put it around the hook here in the back and pull, and it'll kind of snap into place. And then it'll hold itself in, and it'll stay in there all the time, whether the battery's in or not. Then I'm going to go ahead and you see I put the battery in. You see there's a little bit of side to side with this battery. It doesn't quite have a super tight side to side fit. And that's why we have this foam pad here. So I'm going to go ahead and install this foam pad against the mud guard to push the battery towards the center of the car. Now, I'm not going to put it all the way back to this number 2 pad. I'm going to leave a little bit of extra room in case I install the number 3 pad at a later time. Then I have room for it to fit, basically. Let's see, got to get that light better. There you go. So there's a little bit of room. So if you run the thicker pad there, then it'll fit. Now I'm going to drop my battery in, and now it has a nice snug fit against the foam pad. And then you just grab the front here. We've got 2 tabs. You got the front tab, and just grab it and just pull it over the mount, and it'll kind of snap right there into place. And then we have the second tab here on the side, so that when you're ready to remove the battery, you just grab this tab and you just kind of pull it around the front of the mount, and it comes off. So this tab to put it on, this tab to pull it off, and it's nice and easy. So cool little TLR logo we put there in the middle too, so it wasn't too boring for you. And yep, that's it. All right, so we have our extra battery mounts here. Definitely save these in case you want to tune with where your battery location is at a later date, and save your other longer band for if you're running thick batteries someday. All right, and now we're going to move on to our J3 bag here. And this is actually going to be the front wing assembly and the rear wing assembly. So we're actually going to hold off on that for a minute while we follow another couple of steps and install our electronics. And bear with us here. This is going to be a little bit longer of a portion of the project, but I think most guys kind of wonder how the pros get their wiring so tidy, so clean. And I'm going to go ahead and do one here, and I'm going to try and show you as much detail as I can. So I use the Much More Pro V2 Fleta ESC, and for me, the speed controller has the best feel. It has really, really good brakes, really smooth, a ton of power, but very smooth delivery. Obviously, there's a lot of ESCs on the market that you can choose from, and a lot of them that work very well. But I do run the Much More stuff myself. All right, so we have our speed controller here. We have a fan. I'm going to go ahead and install the fan. And I actually have an aluminum plate here that goes on top of the Much More fans. Some screws. So I'm going to set the car off to the side while I kind of get the speed controller more ready to go. We get the fan out, and it comes with some screws so you can put the fan directly on, but when you use this aluminum shroud, you do need to run the longer screws. So what is easiest, I find, is to plug the plug in first and then screw the fan on. So there's a port that's marked fan. I think you can see most of the speed controllers will have something like that if they don't have the fan installed already. I think, does the Hobby Wing stuff come with the fan pre-installed, Ryan?
It does, yeah. Pretty much it's just solder it in and you're good to go.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and install this plate using these screws.
What sort of chassis tape, servo tape are we going to be using today, Frank?
I use 3M. It's a outdoor extra strength servo tape. Double-sided tape. It has like a red wrapper and it's gray. It's like a gray foam. And for me, for my money, that's the best that you can get. It sticks like really, really, really well. But when you need to get it off, you're not spending all day cleaning it up. It comes off pretty well.
Okay.
So it seems to be my preferred. All right, so I got these screws in there. I'm just going to go back and kind of snug them back up. Make sure that they won't come loose at some point. And then we do have on the Much More, you have a switch. I don't use the switch myself, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. That has a nice little plug on it, which is pretty cool. And then one thing that's nice on the much more stuff here is this receiver wire comes out this side, but if you look on the bottom of the plate, it actually can come out either side. There's a hole on the other side. So I'm actually going to take this plate off and have it come out the other side because it's going to be a little easier for the way that it fits in this car. I just got to grab a Phillips screwdriver real quick. So in this, you know, a little bit of detail, getting in the nitty gritty, but I mean, this is the type of thing that we do when we're mounting our electronics in the cars. We, you know, route the wire out the other side because it's a little bit shorter and looks a little cleaner. You do stuff like this when you're doing your electronics also, Ryan?
Which stuff in particular? Sorry.
Just trying to shorten the wires and, you know, kind of get everything really clean.
Absolutely. It almost, with my buddies at the track, it almost becomes a competition as to who can have the cleanest looking wire job in the world. So it's kind of fun. It's one of those tinkering elements, I would say, in the RC world that yeah, you do have fun on race day, but then when you're back home wrenching and just kind of like working on stuff, it's one of those things that's just kind of fun, passes the time, and you know, get to take a point of pride in the car that you made and make it look good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, so you can see I have it out, and these wires connect right there. I'm just going to kind of flop them over, and now they'll come out the other side. And pretty easy, pretty straightforward.
That's pretty cool how that ESC, you can flip it around like that. That's really handy.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. It's like you let's say for like touring car versus off-road versus two-wheel versus four-wheel, like you definitely need the wiring to be flexible for all the different applications.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like for me, it working on our four-wheel drive, it's definitely easier for the wire to come out this side. So yep, there's the 4 screws go back in, and obviously there's the short ones go in the front, and the long ones go in the rear. And you know, if you don't feel comfortable, you know, doing stuff like this, I mean, I would say don't do it. You know, it's kind of one of those things. If you don't, it's only something that you should do if you feel that it's worth it, and if you feel comfortable doing it. Do you open up the cases on any of your electronics, or is that kind of the go no go zone for you, Ryan?
The only time I'll do that on the Hobby Wings is if I'm installing, they have like an optional case where you can put a bigger fan on it. And then that requires you to open up the ESC so that you can change out the casing. But other than that, I try to leave those things alone because I know I'm going to get in there and start doing things I shouldn't do and void warranties and all that fun stuff. So I try to leave it alone.
Okay, makes sense. All right, so I don't know about you, but I'm very particular, and I'm actually going to use some TQ 13 gauge wire here. So I'm actually going to take all 5 of these wires off, put some new wires on. I'm also going to put a slightly longer lead on the capacitor here. So what I want is, when I install this in the car, it's actually going to go in like so. And I want the capacitor to come all the way around and sit on this side of the speed controller so that it'll sit underneath the servo link here. And right now the wires just aren't quite long enough to get there. So I'm going to swap those wires out and make them a little bit longer. So definitely now is a great time. If you guys have some questions, you can kind of watch what I'm doing. But Ryan and I can answer some questions because this definitely takes a couple of minutes. And like I said, it's you know, maybe a kind of extreme in terms of the build that we would normally do, but this is the type of thing that a lot of us really do when we're building cars, and just want to, you know, for people that haven't done it before, or you know, haven't wonder how you know, Wally Builds does his wires so clean, or any of that sort of stuff. Like these are the things that we're doing.
Yeah, this stuff I definitely would say take your time and have a game plan. Like it's one of those things that my dad always used to tell me, you can always make a wire shorter, you can't make it longer. So
Yes.
if there's a wire in there that's not going to be something that's easily replaced, if you have to measure it 3 times before you make a cut or do something, then go ahead, measure it 3 times. Nobody is rushing you. So if you do want to jump in there and do this kind of stuff, great, totally. We're here to help, encourage you to go in there and make it your own, but just take your time, really make sure you know what you're about to do, because sometimes it might be hard to fix, a mistake or an error or something like that.
Yeah, this is definitely not something where like you show up to race your new car on a club night and like you're trying to wire your stuff before you get on the track, right?
Yeah, no.
you don't want to be doing any of this. But I try and encourage people to, if you're gonna spend time at the track, try as you can, at least for people that have areas to wrench at home, definitely try and get a lot of your wrenching done at home, where you're less rushed for time, and then you maximize your track time actually at the track.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like a little side note just on what Frank's doing here. This is actually something that I'll do whenever it's just time to replace the lead wires on my ESC. Most of them have the external terminal on the outside there. Like he's got as much more. I know the Hobby Wing ESCs have it. And I know that like Tikins and a lot of the other ones, this is pretty common. But just this is kind of something that I would say, if you've soldered before at least a few times, then go for it. If you've never soldered anything before, just because your ESC is a pretty expensive piece of equipment, it's one of those things that maybe you could, on a day when you have more time at the track, ask a buddy there who's done it before to maybe help you do it, or just give you a couple pointers before you tackle something like this. I would just hate to see anybody ruin their brand new ESC and they're putting it in a 22X4 and then they go out to the track and something doesn't work. That'd be really frustrating. So this is something that only if you have tremendous amount of confidence and a little bit of knowledge, that yes, go for it. If not, then hold off.
This is definitely like the more advanced portion of the build. You can definitely shortcut this if you're not comfortable doing it. So you just drop the Speedo in, make it all fit. Put a zip tie around the wires that are too long. Use the wires that come on it. All that sort of stuff. So I got my soldering iron out, letting that get warmed up a little bit. Get a little water on the sponge. Get my solder out. Let's see, where is my solder?
So Frank, out of all the TLR drivers and the guys that you pit with and see on the reg, who's got the cleanest looking solder joints?
Dakota Fenn.
Really? Okay.
No. It's kind of a joke. We always give him a hard time about his wiring. We've definitely he's made some huge improvements.
Okay.
Without a doubt. And whose car is super clean? Eli Westrup's cars are usually really clean. I know I'm always impressed when I see those. I'm just trying to find my roll of solder. I know I put it somewhere, but where I put it, I cannot find it.
It's actually a really great point that you made unintentionally, that some people, they get really hung up on things like this that are arguably more aesthetic than like literal race function. And so you have Dakota Fenn, who's literally just like a god among men when it comes to his ability to drive and just beat almost anyone on any given day. And then not a diss, he doesn't have like the cleanest wire job in the world. It's more just like he just puts it in, it works, and then it's good to go kind of thing. Like it's decent, but it's not like the cleanest in the world. So obviously you can still go fast if your wiring isn't absolutely perfect.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like I said, we're going full deep here, in terms of the wiring. So I'm just gonna let the hot iron get all the way up to temp, because obviously the hotter it is, the easier it works. The faster that it melts the joint, and the less heat that it transfers throughout the ESC.
Yes, that is key.
So I saw a question show up in the chat for you.
Oh yeah, let's see. Jumping into the chat here. Let's jump up to Michael LeMay. He asked, which Hobby Wing ESC do I run in my 4-wheel drive? I run the XR10 Pro, the G2. It's the Passion Edition, red, obviously, naturally matches my paint scheme there. So that's what I'm running. And then I actually do the same thing that Frank does. I take off the 12 gauge wire that comes on it and I put the 13 gauge wire on it. So save a little bit of weight there and it makes it look nice and purty. Let's see. Kenneth Eric, he was asking what motor I run in my 22X4. And that would obviously be, I don't know if you can see from there, but it's the Trinity X Factor 13.5 because I'm I'm not a big boy yet like Frank. I'm still running in the spec class. So
yeah, it's all good. I mean, I ran this. I definitely had my time in the spec class too. So
I think that possibly this year I might kind of start dipping my toes in it and running mod at the local races here as soon as we can get some inventory for that stuff. A little bit of hold up on some of the parts here, but it's something I'm going to get into this year and see if I don't break too many parts.
So one tip I have here, and you might be able to see better, I'm going to do this cam real quick, is I'm taking these wires off kind of one at a time, clean the iron, give it a sec to kind of warm up because usually the water is kind of cold on it. Put a little bit of solder on, and then get the wire. You don't need to tug on the wire because you can tell when it's starting to melt because it'll start moving. And then once it starts moving, you just pull it off. And then the end of the wire is hot. You just tap that on your sponge there that's cold, and it'll cool down the wire enough that it's not going to melt anything.
This is one of those steps in the process that you can't really force anything to happen. Like pushing harder on the iron isn't necessarily going to make anything happen faster. So knowing how to get some fresh solder on the joint and loosen it up and just knowing how that stuff works is going to be key.
Yeah. And like I said, there's probably nothing wrong with this much more wire. They put on the nice beefy 12 gauge, and I'm sure that it works great and it transfers power for everything that it needs to. I just like the 13 gauge, a little bit lighter, a little bit more flexible. So it just looks a little bit cleaner wired into the car. So went ahead and I got all the terminals off there. If you can't hold the heat sink on your ESC, then it's getting too hot. And then one tip that I have is if it does feel like it's getting kind of warm like that, just go take it and put it in the fridge for like 2 minutes and it'll drop the temp on it real fast. So now I'm going to basically mock it up in the car. Okay, so this speed controller is going to mount right about here. I'm going to put this wire through just to kind of hold it. All right, so I'm going to have this guy sitting here. I want to make sure that I have it that it clears the steering here. And then I want to make sure that I leave enough room between the center brace and the speed controller that I can take this mount that holds the front bearing and move it forward to the forward holes. And if I don't leave enough room there, then I won't be able to try that setup tuning option later. So I'm just going to kind of hold it there. And that's about where we're going to be. Now I'm going to take my my new wire here, and I'm just going to basically hold it and just route it to the motor, see about how long it needs to be. And if anything, I'm going to err on the long side. I'm going to cut it a little bit longer than it needs to be cut. And I'm going to trim a little bit off when it comes time to actually solder it to the motor. But when I'm putting them on the ESC, I want them to be a little bit on the long side. And now, because the other posts are closer to the motor, if I cut 3 this length, then they'll all be at least long enough.
Got a quick question in the chat there.
Yep.
Talking about the difference from 12 to 14 gauge. Do you think that there's a big difference for stock class?
I don't. You're not running enough amps to hit the current limit of the wire.
Agreed.
I think some people kind of an old school thing was, there was a thought that really made a difference, but I don't believe so myself.
Yeah, no, I think that there's some ESCs like the Hobbywing ESC, and I don't know if there's any others out there that will come with 13 gauge wire, and then you can run it on mod. So obviously they know that it's not going to be an issue.
Yep. I think 12 gauge wire is just more common out in the world, non-RC stuff. So it's easier for them to acquire it and probably less expensive too.
Oh, true. Yeah, good point.
That's why I think a lot of the Speedos come with it. All right. So now we take this ESC back out of the car, move the car back out of the way. Now I have my wires. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean about 3 millimeters off the end of all 5 wires. You can see I have my power wires laid out over here. I have my motor wires laid out in a separate pile, so I know which is which. And my shorter power wires for the positive and the longer ones for the negative.
Frank, are you a super cool guy and have custom heat shrink for your like your wire management there?
No, I'm not a big fan of the heat shrink on the wire management.
Okay.
Yeah, no, not against anybody that uses it. I just it's not my style. So I figure if I route the wires the right way, they'll all kind of stay next to each other as is. All right, so I have that done. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean the iron. I'm going to get a little bit of solder, and I'm basically just going to put the wire, like I'm just going to put it on the speed controller just to get the wire off the table. And then just put a little bit of solder on it. And then I'm just going to use this guy here. Just kind of prop them up so they're not sitting on the microfiber. And I was down through the wire. Kind of got to get a little solder on the top, and then you kind of get it so it'll flow through. Get a nice good contact.
Nice. Like it. I like that. That's a nifty little tip. I never thought about doing it like that. It's so efficient. Just sit it there on your X-Acto knife like that.
Yeah.
Frank coming in with the pro tips, guys. He never fails.
Yeah, I mean, it cools pretty quick, but I mean, the microfibers are basically just plastic, right? So they melt very easily. All right. So what I always do is I'm always going to solder this B wire or the middle post first, just because it's easier to kind of go from the middle out on both sides. That way you always have more access. It's really hard. Let's say if you soldered all 5 and then you try to do the middle one last, it's going to be the hardest one to reach.
When you solder yours on, I don't know. I can't see from here the wiring. Does it have like designation or branding on down like a line of it?
Yeah, it does. It's on the case.
The
So you can kind of see right there, laser etched on the case behind each post. A minus, B plus, C.
There you go. I was referring to the wire itself because I get really particular about the little, some of them will have like printed branding, and I make sure all of that's pointed to like the bottom side so that it's not facing up.
So the TQ wire does, and what I do is I actually go back later with brake cleaner and just clean it off.
Oh, you just take it off. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, because otherwise, to get it all to like really match, you end up cutting or using more wire, which I'm not, I don't want to be too wasteful.
There we go.
When you have the wire has like a natural like direction, like curve to it from how it was wound on the spool. So if you try to put wires on in different directions because of that, then you'll have wires maybe that run next to each other that want to bend a different way because of how they were on the spool to get the writing to line up.
Good point. Good point.
So like I think I'll try to put the wire on based on how it was curved from the factory or from the spool. So I'm gonna go my positive wire here.
Just answering a quick comment from the chat here from Jan Emmerich. He says
one of our team drivers just tried to call me, so he must not know that we're doing a live video.
Oh, that might have been the little glitch that we had a second ago.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
We lost audio.
No.
All right, hold on one sec.
Oh, you lost audio. Oh no. We can all still hear him. Team drivers. What can you do?
Yeah, we lost the audio again because of that phone call.
Should we call him out?
Nah, I'll let him slide.
Okay, all right. Frank, he's a nice guy.
Yeah, I try to be. So anyways, I got to just reboot basically the phone portion of this.
Hopefully my audio doesn't get cut here, but answering a question here in the chat, or just a comment from Jan, he said down is B74, how dare you mention these words in our chat? No, I'm just kidding. Have the wires very tight to the motor and the ESC because there's not much space between motor and body. How is it on the 22X-4? It's actually pretty good. Like I didn't build it and think that the clearance was like really tight. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's roomy, but it's definitely, it's very easy to manage. It's not difficult at all. Let's see. What else do we have here?
All right. We're back.
You good?
I think so.
You hear me? I don't know if you want to. I'm in the middle now. Does that matter? Can you shift them or no?
Yeah, I can. Give me 1 sec.
Okay.
But you can hear me now.
Yep. You're good, man.
All right.
Good. Kyle was asking, where do I get my custom shrink tube? Top secret, man. Top secret.
I know Ian Riley prints them.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he does. He does that part of the Riley Motorsport deal that they do.
Go check him out.
So, all right. So now I'm going to do this negative wire.
One thing that I don't know if you'd already mentioned it, Frank, so forgive me if I'm repeating any information, but if you are going down the path of choosing to do this here with the custom wiring and removing and then putting some more on, it is very, 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 very important that you keep all of the terminals separate and that no solder is going to clog up in between them and you short out 2 points of contact. If you do, you might have a little bit of a disaster on your hand. So as you're going throughout the whole process, make sure that you're not using too much solder and you're not connecting any of these points because that would be very bad.
Yeah, and I think it's the good news is without any power connected, you can't really damage it while you're doing it. So it's more about just making sure that when you're done that everything is clean, that nothing's touching, so that when you do add power that you don't have any issues.
Yes, sir.
All right, one left.
Ooh, what was that?
Somebody firing up the hot rod outside.
I hear that.
It's not mine, unfortunately.
Oh man.
One thing that helps sometimes if you're having trouble getting heat into both joints is to actually heat both joints separately, and then when they're still pretty hot, put them together and then melt them both at the same time.
Oh yeah, good point. That's definitely something that I'll do. Is I'll go in to the terminal I'm about to go into, get a tiny little fresh little touch of some solder, get that all nice and hot, and it'll cool off quickly. But then you go right in with your wire, and it will make things solder like up immediately, and that will definitely expedite the process.
Yeah, I'm just making sure I have my kind of pulled my wires where they're going to go, make sure that they're all lining up the way that I want them to. And I'm going to just adjust this one a little bit. Get a little bit more compliant with how I want it to look. And adjust this one a little bit.
Just to reiterate a point that Frank made earlier, in case you guys are just tuning in, this is not something that you want to do on track day. If it's necessary, I understand, but this is something you definitely want to do at home where you have plenty of time, no pressure, and you can just make it look nice and keep everything good.
Yep. So we have all of our joints there. Pretty clean. Not perfect, but pretty good.
Good.
And basically I have my 3 motor wires here. I have my 2 battery wires here. And that's how they're going to route. So just making sure that they all kind of, you know, if you kind of grab them all here, like, are they all kind of matching in terms of how they flow away from the speed controller? And they look pretty good. So we have that. Now, next, I need to do the capacitor here. Now, this I'm going to do, I definitely know that I have the shrink tube that will fit for when this is done. I'll be able to re-shrink tube around the capacitor. And basically what I need here is longer wires so that I can go from the positive and negative terminals all the way around to the other side here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take these 2 existing wires off and put new wires on. And then I'm going to leave those wires long, and then I'm going to put the shrink tube back on here and then solder them to the terminals, cut them and solder them later.
Frank, you've been around since the brush days, right?
Yes.
Do you remember, what did you run back then? Did you run the Novak stuff?
I ran both, Novak and LRP, depending on what time we're talking. And I ran some Tekin stuff even before then.
Dude, do you remember the capacitors for those Cyclone ESCs?
I do.
Those things were huge.
I remember you soldered them straight onto the terminals.
It
wasn't like a cap bank.
Right. Yeah, it was just like, boop, there it is.
Yeah, I remember if you didn't have them secured very well, you would actually like break them. You'd break the wire off the cap.
Yeah. I was going through some of my old stuff the other day and I saw them. I was like, oh man, those things are huge.
So I'm going to use, I have a red paint pen. I'm just going to mark this wire joint here just so that I know that it's positive. So that when I get ready to solder everything back together, I don't have any confusion over what's positive and what's negative. And you definitely want to mark it somehow so that you can keep track of it. So again, I'm going to run this wire around just so I have an idea about how long it needs to be. And I'm going to cut it a little longer than it needs to be, just to be sure that it's not too short. And again, I'll cut it and solder it in a few minutes.
Yeah, if you keep wires too tight, you can possibly run into some problems of things that need just a little bit more flex, like when the car is jumping and landing. So you want it to be able to live peacefully, so to speak.
Yeah, and then I mean, you definitely don't, like you said before, you can't cut a wire longer.
Right.
So when you're getting going, you want to make sure that if anything, you cut it too long, and then if you got to go back later and shorten it, that's pretty easy.
Do you want me to take a quick question from the chat here, Frank?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's see. Riley Becker is asking, could either of you go over which option parts you would recommend? And I'm assuming he's talking about the 22X4 because that is what we are building. Yes. Frank, did you want me to answer that one, or you got some good suggestions right off the bat?
Yeah, go for it.
Right off of the bat, I would say, and it's not even like a necessary thing. I know that we talked about this in the previous streams. Yes, the one that I was in yesterday, day before, I don't remember now. But kit's going to come with a slipper diff, which is going to be great for spec racing. Frank has definitely said that many times. And then if you run just like some dirt tracks, or you have like a different preference as far as center diff feel, I would say a center gear diff is a great option part to put in the car right off the bat. Something that Frank's installing today is the Esc Plate. That's something that just makes it really easy on race day if you're doing some quick little maintenance or cleaning some stuff out. It just kind of everything comes out as one piece. So I'd say that's like just a nice convenient piece to get. But other than that, the car doesn't really need anything. Those are the two option parts that I can say that might be a good pickup right out of the box. What would you say, Frank?
Those are all good ones. I'm definitely down with the composite gears.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
For the internal diff gears, I think those are really awesome to have. I know a lot of guys are running them, whether you're running modified or spec racing, either way. So that would be probably my next one to recommend.
Hey, Frank, I think that the question, sorry, I'm not familiar with the stream thing. It's popping up from the program. Is there a way that we can rotate that one out? They're saying it's blocking a little bit of what you're doing.
Yeah, that I put that up, and you just got to click on it again, and it'll pull it down. I don't know if do you have the ability to pop questions up and down?
I might, but I'm a little bit slow, so forgive me.
Oh no, and it might be because I was the originator of the stream, it might only let me do it. I'm not sure.
I'll do it if I can. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So just put some shrink tube over this. Now I'm just shrinking it down. You want to try and get the shrink tube in the blue part of the flame, because it doesn't tend to burn that way. It actually burns when it's at the edge of the flame in like the yellow or orange. So it's definitely hot, so be careful. Duh. That kind of goes without saying. And then one thing that's cool that you can do is when it's hot, if you kind of grab the end, you can actually use your pliers and kind of like crimp it together, and it'll actually stay like that, and then you can cut it off. So almost close it. Close it off.
I know we're all admiring Frank's very tedious, well done wiring work, but if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll be happy.
You guys are all getting bored, I know. But some people don't know how to do this, and I want to share.
No, I think it's good. I was just, in case people were curious whether or not they can ask questions, just letting them know we're here for them.
All right, so we have our cap with wires. We have our speed controller with wires, all set. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put that electronics carbon plate in the car, and we're going to really kind of lay out exactly where the speed controller is going to fit, so we can kind of start to finalize some of these things. So far, we've pretty much just gotten it ready and kind of roughed out, and we're going to need to start taping things down and getting them more finalized. So we have our flathead screws there. We have our carbon plate. One thing that we definitely want to do is you just kind of put the carbon plate in there. You want to take these screws and definitely clean them and thread lock them. They're pretty short and they're pretty small. And your speed controller is pretty heavy, so it has a tendency to kind of work its way around. So you want to make sure that it's not going to come loose. And you don't need to gob on the thread lock on these, but you definitely want some on there.
Usually at this part of the build of a car, it's like so close to done. I get anxious. I get so excited because I know that it's like, oh yeah, we're almost ready to hit the track now.
Yeah, but this is the part where it's like, if you try and rush this or don't leave yourself time to do it, then it becomes not fun.
Yeah.
And it's part of the build. I mean, the chassis always go together pretty well, pretty easy. I mean, I would say on a two-wheel drive car, I spend more time on this than I do on actually building the chassis itself.
Agreed. Yeah. I don't know. Usually for me, like I will build the car kind of like in one sitting, and then on a completely different wrench session, I come in and then I wire it, and I kind of that way I don't like rush through anything or make anything worse than it needs to be.
All right. So one thing I'm going to do here is I have this speed controller wire that's going to run underneath the tunnel here, and it's going to go over to the servo. So I'm actually going to put a drop of glue on the case right here where I want the wire to run. And I'm actually going to, pull the wire snug and flat against the case and then hold it down while the glue dries. So it'll be nice and flat, flush, and it won't really move around. And it'll just kind of keep everything looking a little bit tight and clean. And then we also, didn't hold it long enough.
That's a nice little tip. I've never thought about that.
Yeah, really, like if you have to wrap it around, let's say like 2 edges, it really helps. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And again, keep in mind, super glue is pretty permanent. I mean, you could try shoe glue. It just takes a long time to dry. That's kind of the downside.
Are you using like some medium CA or thin CA?
It's just Proline tire glue.
Okay.
I think it's medium-ish. All right, so let me go ahead and put this through that tunnel there. And kind of line everything up, see how it's going to fit. The capacitor here is going to sit like this. All right. So now I know how everything's going to sit in the car. Now I'm going to use, so this is that 3M servo tape I was telling you about. It has a red wrapper and it's kind of gray on the inside. They make some stuff that's clear, but I don't think that the clear stuff sticks quite as well. So I like the gray. So what I'm going to do is I put my electronics right on the roll. Then I'll cut them off like so. Just kind of cut around the edge and try and get it to basically form fit. With like the capacitors, you don't have a ton of space, so you want to make sure you get as much tape as you can. And then I'll take a black Sharpie and basically just kind of color the edge of that gray foam so that you don't really see the gray foam in the car. And again, totally unnecessary, but I know that I can do it, so it'll bug me if I don't.
It's one of the things that my dad would say about almost any project we were working on. Like when you're getting towards the end and you're doing little stuff like that, he says it's always in the details. That's what's going to make the difference in the end.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, this is, Koda wins a bazillion races, and this is the type of stuff that he might not necessarily do all the time. So when it comes down to it, does it really matter in terms of getting those race wins? I would say no. But for me, I know that I can do it. So I know that I want to do it.
I mean, look fast, go fast. Come on.
Yep. So now I'm going to take these capacitor wires here, and basically now they're just kind of routing around the back of the ESC. And now I need to solder them to the bottom end of the positive and negative terminals. And I'm going to plug, just kind of hold my sensor wire in there just so I know where everything needs to fit.
Small little pro tip, if any of you are out there and for whatever reason this is your first race kit you've ever built and you've never put in a sensor wire before, this is like the number one thing when I'm helping guys out on race day. If their car isn't working right, it's because they don't plug their sensor wire all the way in. So just get that pressed nice and firm in there and you'll be good to go.
Yeah. All right, so I have this one ready, cut the right length, get this one ready. One thing I do is I'll kind of like push against the wire with my fingernail and almost like leave a mark on it. Like it won't cut it, but it'll leave a mark so I know where to cut. Because the insulation on the outside of the wire is pretty soft, usually silicone based, because that's why it can handle the heat.
Oh, we got Papa Kaufman in the chat. What's going on, Mr. Kaufman? How you doing? He says, wiring has to be perfect, usually half of the time for a new build for me. Yeah, man. I feel you. It's got to be just right.
Yeah. This is definitely one of the longer portions of a build. So I'm going to run a little bit of shrink tube over the 2 wires here along the back edge of the case. So just make sure it fits, cut it the right length. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on, but I'm not actually going to shrink it yet. I'm just going to put it on. I'll shrink it after I have the wires soldered into place. And it'll kind of just hold them where I have them. And this is where it's helpful to have a vise. Unfortunately, I don't have one. So I just got to kind of make sure I have the speed controller situated so that it's going to pretty much stay where I need it to stay so I can solder the wires. And then grab my needle nose.
This is where it gets fancy, guys. You got to get clever with how you hold stuff when you get these really small little detail solder joints. It can get kind of tricky.
Yep.
And with these smaller parts, if you've never soldered these either, you can cause damage quickly because it's very small. So it doesn't require a whole lot of like heat or attention.
Mm-hmm. Correct times 2. All right.
Travis Fisher says, Ryan's mic is smooth. He sounds like Howard Stern. Hey, my guy. I got to try. I got to try hard. You know, if I can't.
That's quite a compliment.
It is.
Not much to live up to. Just like, probably the most popular radio voice of all time.
Yeah, it's no big deal. And no, it's for those, it's not magic. It's just, I kind of have like a podcast mic set up, and I, like all the videos and stuff that I do, I just make it very extra. Much like we are going very extra and making this ESC the most beautiful ESC install ever. That's kind of the approach I have with all of my stuff. So yeah, it's not necessary, but I enjoy it. So glad you enjoy it. Thanks for the compliment.
All right, so now we got and one thing, like you said, you got to make sure you get the sensor wire plugged all the way in. So you can just I give a little shove with my 1.5 just to make sure everything's fully seated. Now you have, as you can see, you have the, let's go full screen for a sec. I'll just make it a little easier.
Do it.
All right, so we have our cap wires run here through the shrink tube. We have the positive up to the positive, and the negative goes under the sensor wire port and then up to the negative. So it needs to come kind of straight down and then around so that the sensor wire can come out clean.
Dude, and that is clean.
It's all a tight fit, but it all works. And my my super glue here came loose on the wire because I'm rushing. Normally I would just kind of hold it on there for longer.
That's a really clean job, Frank. Like, I'm impressed. This is very well done.
And then we're going to go back and we're going to heat shrink that wire that we had left, because now that everything's in place, it knows exactly how long it needs to be and where the wires need to be held. And then I'm going to do just a little drop underneath that shrink tube to the case so that it just sits flush on the case. And then just kind of hold those for a minute. All right, so do we have any let's see, let's do this real quick. Actually, can you hear me?
Yeah, still got you.
All right, cool. All right, so now we got you up there on top. And so I'm just holding these for a minute. Do we have any more questions in the chat?
I think that we're up to speed there. Okay. I'm gonna double check. We We had Tony CCXRC jump in. He said he's not a racer, but this is fascinating to watch. I agree. It can be, even if you don't know anything about RC, it's these weird like niche videos that you can just it engulfs you into its little world. So I can appreciate it.
All right, so I'm just gonna set this. It's kind of looks like everything's holding good now, and I'm gonna get some. Let's see, all done with the shrink tube for here for a sec. And you know what? I just remembered we need to solder our lead for the fan onto the bottom, which I almost forgot there for a minute.
I was going to say something, but I didn't want to disrupt the flow.
So what I'm going to do here is just kind of mock it all in the car again. And here's the Motive fan. These, I will say that one thing I really recommend is getting one of the fans that does have the aluminum shroud on it, because normally what breaks on these fans is the plastic shroud will flex and then the blades will hit the shroud and then pop the blades off. So if you have, you know, this Motive fan works great, or you can get like, I know Tect makes an aluminum shroud fan. I think some other guys, they tend to work really, really well. So basically our fan's going to go about here and the wire's going to run down. And yeah, this one, I'm going to just, let's see, I'm going to direct solder the fan right to the Speedo. I don't really need the wire lead because the fan is plenty long enough.
I don't know if you'd mentioned it in the other videos, but one thing that after running other cars for a few years, that when I built this car and it has the molded mount piece, it was just like, ah, man, why doesn't everyone do this? This is so smart.
Yeah. And I'm actually going to grab that mount real quick. And I am jumping ahead a little bit. This is bag J4, but I want to get the mount on just so that we make sure we get everything the correct length. We're set our, oh, got the Velcro on the rag. It might never come off. All right, so we have some body clips and wheel nuts, but we have our hardware here for the fan. And one easy way to tell, you know, some people might plug it in to see which way the fan blows, but the fan's always going to blow. There's one side that's open and one side that will have like the bars that connect it. And the bars, the air always blows through those out. So if you ever aren't sure which way it goes, that's the easiest way to tell. So I'm just going to run my screws through here into the mount.
Eli says, Frank's a machine. He's in full wrench mode, even has the armrest out of his way.
Oh, yeah. The chair has these rad armrests, but they don't let me sit all the way up to the edge of the table. So we had to modify. So you can see it's just this one screw that goes in the top here, and you just mount the fan straight on. I just want to make sure I get my wire lengths correct here. All right, so now I kind of mark these with my fingernail so I know where I need to cut.
Again, our mantra of it's harder to make a wire longer. It's always easier to make it shorter.
Yep, absolutely. So I went ahead and marked these. Find my mark there. And these are marked positive and negative. And so what I'm going to do is I'm only going to cut the negative right now, just so I can keep track of which is which.
I know on some of them, they do like lettering on one and not the other. I've seen But all fans, they might be a little bit different.
Yeah, there's actually a positive and a negative on the plug on this one.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course.
So actually just cut the positive. And the negative is going to be, let's see, about this much shorter. So now I know which is which because they're different lengths.
Kenneth Eric, this is a little off topic. He's asking, Frank, is TLR going to be making the new 8TE?
I mean, we're always working on new stuff. As far as what we're making on the 8th scale side of things, I wouldn't be, you know, the expert on that. So it's definitely probably a good question for Ryan Dunford the next time that he's on.
For those of you who don't know, Ryan Dunford, he's the in-house 8th scale expert.
Yes. So one thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to put a piece of shrink tube over these two wires just so that they, when they run all the way back in the car, that they stay pretty much connected so that they're not kind of flopping around. And then once you kind of run them in the car the way that you want, you put the shrink tube and melt the shrink tube on them, then they'll like almost keep that form so they won't move around.
Looks like we're all caught up in the chat at the moment. So if anyone has any questions, please drop them in there. We're here for you guys. And I have to say that it's hard enough for me to do all of this wiring stuff in the sanctuary of my own home and nobody's interrupting me and get it right. And Frank is doing this while trying to broadcast a live stream, communicate with a guest, and try and talk to everybody in chat, and he's still going to get it right. I mean, that just shows you guys. Frank.
I will say it is a little extra pressure. Not going to lie.
It is. It's live too. I mean, this is the real deal.
Yeah, I definitely when I started the video, I knew it was going to take some time, but I didn't anticipate for the video to be this long. So I'm definitely going to say big thanks to Ryan here for trucking through and being with me, keeping us all company and helping commentate while I do some of the more challenging bits of this. And my focus is on that. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to run my wire through here. And I have my sensor wire, I have my fan mount. Now, again, I'm going to make sure I mount this so that I know that I can move my diff housing forward in the event that I want to run the forward motor option. And also so that I know that I'm clear of all of the steering. And then make sure it's nice and square. Press it down hard. Now it's in there. Now this... nice thing about this much more is it's pretty much the exact perfect length for this wire that comes to the receiver. So I don't need to trim that or cut it or put on a shorter terminal, which is nice. I have my sensor wire here. It's going to run kind of underneath the motor and come back here. I'm going to plug this in before I install the fan because it's definitely harder to do after the fan's in. And this is a 150 millimeter sensor wire.
I was just going to say, it'd probably be really good for those if they're watching this maybe after the fact and they're trying to follow along. All those tolerances and the lengths that you were just mentioning, do you think you could switch to a wide cam and really show that like close up so that they know what you were just talking about?
Yeah. All right. So we have our wire that came through the bottom of the tunnel here from the speed controller and goes into the receiver. And you can see it pretty much just comes straight up and goes over. There's not really any extra length. So there's no need to cut or shorten the terminal. And then over here, we're putting on the sensor wire. Comes from the back of the ESC, underneath the mount, around, and to the back of the motor. and this is pretty much the right length. That's 150 millimeters. You could maybe get away with like a 140, but I think the 130 would not be enough. And usually what I do is I get the sensor wire kind of in there and against the guard, and then I'll actually run the fan kind of under it and over it at the same time, and it'll almost hold it down.
Nice and tidy. I like it.
Yep. So I'm actually I'm not stoked on how that looks, so I'm gonna go this way. I'm gonna go back. And tighten that up. See, this is the type of stuff you gotta make sure it looks the way that you need it to look. Because once, like I said, when you wire your car, if you get it right the first time, then you don't have to redo it.
Yeah, that's really a good point, because sometimes if you get something wrong, and depending on which thing you got wrong, you might have to end up doing like multiple other things, redoing them and fixing it, and it can be a really big pain in the butt. So throughout the whole process, like we've been saying, measure twice, cut once, take your time, make sure everything is good, and then it's going to be worth it in the end. Even if it takes you 4 or 5 hours to do what Frank is doing in just a couple hours, that's okay. It's definitely worth it.
All right. So I just put the pliers, like, I don't really grab them. I almost like just slide them over so that they can push on the plastic plug. And then we'll get this fan in here. And then keep in mind, we put the shrink wrap over the fan wires, but we have not yet shrunk the wire. So once we get the wires kind of in place where we want them to be, then you shrink the wire and it'll pretty much like hold that location.
Frank doing top secret things off of camera, getting that heat shrink just right.
Sorry. I was just holding it where it was comfortable.
We know. You're up to those speed secrets. I know.
All right. So there we got our sensor wire and our fan wire both running there on the side of the chassis. And the sensor wire is kind of under the fan wire, so it's going to stay in place.
Beautiful.
All right. So luckily, that was most of the less fun part of the wiring job. And I think Ryan would agree with me. Now we get to do the fairly straightforward, pretty easy part of just getting the wires to the motor and getting the wires to the battery. And, just make sure you know which is which. It's pretty straightforward. And I'm going to grab our little loop here out of bag J3 and a 10 millimeter button head for it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run these wires through the loop. And what I want to do is I want to run the wire that's going to be for this terminal on the back side and the wire for this terminal on the front side. And that way, when they come through the terminal, you always know which one goes to which, even if they're not marked. So you can't plug your battery in backwards. So I have the negative on this side. This is my negative wire. So I'm going to run this negative across. I'm going to run the positive in the front. I'm going to basically put this loop over them. And then I'm going to fasten it down with this button head screw. Now this screw doesn't need to be mega tight. You guys don't have to really tighten it down like crazy. So now you see how you have this kind of inside wire goes to the inside plug and the outside wire goes to the outside plug. As long as you don't cross the wires, you know that they're going to the right location. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my bullets in. And when I do this, I don't put the bullets in all the way. I put them in about halfway. And I do that on purpose because I don't want the top of the bullet to be touching the plastic to where it could potentially melt the plastic if it got hot. I'm also going to take this rubber band and kind of move it out of the way so that it doesn't get next to the iron. And then what I'll do is I'll do this inside wire first, and I'll give it like a nice kind of gracious bend. I don't need it to be like super tight. The important thing is that it doesn't get into the gear. And again, I just kind of use my fingernail, leave a little line, cut it. This outside one, I can eyeball that. Doesn't take a whole lot off. Have you been doing the same pretty much the way that you route the wires, Ryan?
Yes, and I'm glad that you articulated that little run the negative on the inside and then the positive on the outside. I think that's pretty good. That's pretty true to almost all batteries are going to be in that configuration. As far as I know, there might be a few that are opposite, but if it is, then just be aware of it, and then you'll know which one is which.
Yeah, and like I said, for the batteries that you run, I would basically route the wires the way that you need for the batteries that you run.
Right.
So if your battery happens to have the positive on the inside, then put the positive, make that the inside loop on the mount here.
Yeah, obviously, as you guys can see, you can see the color indication on Frank's battery is red on the outside edge of the car, and then the black is on the inside, indicating the negative. So he is wiring it up accordingly.
Yep. All right, and you definitely want to, when soldering these terminals, you just definitely don't want them to get too hot for too long. So just make sure that you get the solder melted and then get out of there. And then we'll go ahead and do this negative terminal. Definitely need a little bit more solder.
Do you solder yours at kind of like an angle so that the wire is almost coming out at like maybe a slight degree change there?
Yeah, slight uptick. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
Because if you have the terminal sitting up out of the battery as you're soldering, and then you solder it flat, it can be kind of difficult to pull that sucker out of there. So giving it that little bit of upkick that Frank just mentioned is a great way to make it easy to pull those plugs in and out.
Yep, and now we have power. I mean, you can hear my fan kick on.
And
a little bit
for those just joining, if you don't know what's going on there, why you heard his fan is because we hardwired the fan to the back of the ESC to give it a little bit more juice, and because he's running the Spectrum steering servo, which has the built-in receiver plugs there, and there aren't enough plugs to run a extension from the fan into a receiver, so we had to go with the hardwire option in this build today.
All right. I'm going to add just a little bit more solder to this solder joint here on the negative. All right. So there we have it pretty good. And then this is definitely a tip that I've shared with a lot of guys. And I'm just going to kind of, so what I do is I run the band here over the battery. Okay. And plug it in, and you have this nice little kind of rectangle here, and you just put your positive plug in there, or your outside plug, and it'll just kind of sit in there and it'll stay. So when you go to like reach under your body and plug everything in, it's just kind of already sitting there. And then it's not like flopping around in the car when you're setting ride height, stuff like that. So you got that. I use these are testers, paint pens, red and a black. And what I'll do now is I'm using all black wire. What I'll do is I'll actually paint the positive terminal red and the negative terminal black. That way I always know which one's positive and which one's negative. And for me, it's a really clean way of marking it without using, you know, shrink tube or something that's kind of like a duller red color. Like this has a nice shine to it, so it looks pretty good.
One thing I've done in the past, and if you guys don't trust yourselves on race day, if you think you're going to mix the wires up, even with the little indicators there, if you're following along the steps so far and you saw that we put in wire, you could just solder in a red wire, and then that's your positive cable. That's something that I've done in the past. So just a little option there if you so feel inclined.
Correct. All right, so now we're just gonna get the motor wires on. I always start with the bottom wire. So you basically get that wire routed, and then you can run all the other wires kind of along it. And when you do that, then you get kind of all the wires running pretty much like in the same shape or parallel, so that they look like they're all in line well.
Can you move the car just a little bit forward there, Frank? Sorry.
Yeah.
It was just out of shot.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drop a little solder on this terminal here. And for me, this is the easiest way to do it, is to basically just rock the car up against your hands, and then you're soldering to the top instead of trying to kind of solder from the side. And I need some pliers real quick,
because that wire's going to get hot.
Yep, it didn't get too hot, but it definitely moved to where it's hard to get it exactly where I want it at that angle. Okay, so now we have the first one. Now we can take the second one and basically match that shape, that angle. And that's why I cut one wire at a time and solder one wire at a time. So you can try and kind of work the next wire off the previous wire, instead of cutting them all at once and then finding out like, oh, you know, this one was actually 3 millimeters longer, so it has more bend to it, or whatever the case might be.
I don't know about you guys, but usually by this point, I'm so far into a build, my area that I'm working in is so cluttered and there's just so much stuff, and I get a little bit of anxiety, and I have to like take a moment, clear it out, make sure that I keep it nice and neat so I'm not losing things.
Yep, same here. So see, we have pretty much, you know, you kind of have the same shape here and the same kind of angle on those wires, and that's kind of what I'm going for, is being able to get them basically in line without the need of like a piece of shrink tube or something.
It looks good, man. I'm impressed.
I've done enough of these. You figure I'd figure it out at some point.
If you had to guess, ballpark, how many kits have you built, Frank? Are we talking hundreds, thousands?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I would say at least like 50 or 60.
Okay.
Like, let's say the 4-wheel drives. I mean, I've built, this is my 6th one, 7th,
Wow.
8th. This is my 8th 4-wheel of the 22X-4. So I built the original test car, the test car for carpet. That's 2. I built Dakota's World's car. I built Reno and Tom's cars before I sent them to them. So what is that, 5? I built the photo car. I built my Reedy race car, so that's 7. And now I've built this one.
Wow.
So that's 8. So I built 8 22X4s. So yeah, like now I'm thinking I might be kind of conservative on the old 60. when you think about just, you know, 8 just in this vehicle alone.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that's wiring's done. Hallelujah. So you kind of see I have those wires there. They kind of all run in together and without any shrink tube over them. And you asked earlier, you know, why I run or don't run the shrink tube, and that's kind of why. I think that if you can do it like this without needing the shrink tube, it's like +1 even cooler. So
it's true. It looks clean. It looks really good.
Yeah. So
actually,
as a whole, I mean, this is the car all wired up with the much more Speedo on the motor, battery, and fan, and then the Spectrum 2-in-1, and everything's just super tight, super clean, nice and ready to go. All right.
Tony Griff in the chat, he says that is clean.
That's what we were shooting for. All right. So one little thing here, we have this antenna mount, and you can see it has a hole on the bottom, and then let's see if we can get it to focus. There, it's got a hole in the bottom, and then it has like a little, for lack of a better term, nipple on it. That actually sits right here in the chassis. So you use the hole in the chassis that doesn't, that you don't put that forward mount in, and then there's a little indentation there. And so this guy will just sit in the indentation and then screw into the hole, so it kind of lock itself in, and it'll sit right there. So if you're going to run an antenna mount, you can do that. We're not going to need to on this car, so we'll just set that off to the side. And body clips, we're going to set those off to the side. We didn't go with the body clips, so we don't need those. We have our wheel nuts here, but we got to mount tires before we do wheel nuts. Let's go ahead and cut out our wing. So we have our rear wing here. It comes pre-cut, but I still do a little bit of trimming. I do like to cut these little angles off the front. And that just comes down to, it's almost like a style. Like, I don't think you'll ever notice a difference in handling, whether you cut them off or not. But I think it looks cool. It's probably a little easier on the old carpet tracks out there. And I'm kind of doing a little bit of a tool roundup here. Get my working station kind of back in order, because I think that anxiety that Ryan was talking about set in a little bit for me.
Appreciate the honesty, Frank.
Yeah. Well, you got, it's kind of getting messy. I don't like a messy pit. I mean, I don't honestly really need the manual anymore, so I'm going to set that off to the side. Put that back. Oh, we almost forgot to put the transponder in. We'll do that after we do the wing. All right, so then we have our wing here. Now, on the TLR wing, we have a bunch of lines across the back, you can see. And basically, this is the lowest line, and then we'll call that the second line, the third line, and then full. So I'm going to cut down to the lowest line for four-wheel drive, and I basically just follow this line all the way around. I know some people use a Dremel for cutting wings. I hate getting the Dremel out, so I'll always use scissors, and I'll use an X-Acto knife to clean it up if I need to. All right, so we got, just kind of follow this curve. All right, got that pretty straight.
Do you do cutouts for the shock standoff nuts?
Yeah, yep. I'm gonna get to that in just a sec. One thing is these wings are cut by laser, so sometimes you'll get a little bit of like an orange tinge around the edge. So like, I know this is way like OCD, but I'll just kind of like just scrape the edge off a little bit. And I usually do that all the way around the front too. The rear I just cut off, so you don't really need to do that. But and then just obviously, if you're working with a knife, just be careful. I've cut my finger a couple times, not being careful enough. I know Dunford cut his finger pretty good one time. So, and you'll see when you do that most of what comes off is more of an orangish color and not clear. All right, so we have that all ready to go. Now we'll grab our car. And now that we have shocks and electronics and everything in it, we're going to get fancy, and I'm going to use a car stand. And what I'm looking for is here, I'm going to mount the wing from the top so that the front edge of the wing here matches the front of the tower. So it's basically mounted forward a little bit. And I'm going to get out my Sharpie and I'm going to mark the wing up. And this is the process. This is how I mount my two-wheel drive wing also. So basically hold it so that it matches the front here on both sides. And it's pretty centered. And then I'll basically draw the shape of the tower on the wing. And then I'll cut that out. And it's just, I mean, it's real rough. It doesn't need to be a work of art. Definitely isn't. But that's what I need to clear. Ryan, I hope you ate lunch before you came on.
I actually didn't, and I'm starving, but it's okay. We're here for the cause.
You can always just grab a bite and we can mute your mic while you chew.
Nah, it's good, man. It's good.
Right,
The dogs will get all riled up if I head out there, so.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna basically get this close, get it a little bit rough, but basically get it where I need to get it, and then I'll clean it up after.
Okay, as you're cutting that out, if you want to switch to my cam, I can show them what I did on my wing. I know that this isn't the TLR wing, this is the Proline wing, but this is what we're doing. Because sometimes if you flip and the wing gets pushed, you guys have probably had it happen before where it'll get stuck on top of the shock nut and then you're going around the track and your wing just kind of looks really wonky. So we're trying to avoid that by just having it cut out right there so that when the wing flexes and stuff like that, it doesn't grab the shock standoff. So really easy. The way that I do mine, because Frank he's so attention to detail and he's doing it probably the better way, but I just use a sanding drum on a Dremel and I just mark the point where the shock standoff is and then I just go on both sides, and that's how I do mine. Easy peasy. And then
Easy
I get
enough.
Dremel dust all over me and I hate it.
Yeah. So basically I just make sure that I'm good, that everything clears, and I'm going to go back. Now I'm going to use my Sharpie and I'm just going to mount or mark where the holes need to be. Okay, just make sure I get those good because I hate a crooked wing. It definitely messes with any OCD that I might have.
Oh, for sure.
And
It's the worst.
Just take a body reamer here and get the holes started. So what I do is I get the holes started and I go on both sides so there's no flashing, but I don't go very big. I keep them pretty small, and then that way you can basically put it back on your wing mount and make sure that everything is still straight. And if it's not, then you can kind of open up the hole in a direction if needed to help straighten it back up some.
And these holes are pretty factory with that. Was that an Aeromax reamer?
Yeah.
That thing.
They had some Aeromax tools when I went to the Worlds in China, and I just thought they were too cool. And I didn't want to get a whole set of them, so I just got a reamer.
I mean, it's pretty dialed, not gonna lie.
It's really, really light. I mean, that's the nice thing about it.
I would fit in your toolbox so well.
It does. So yeah, so here we go. We got it on, and I need to go. It's pretty straight, but I need to go a little bit more towards the inside. So I'm just gonna kind of, push towards the inside as I open up these holes a little bit more, and it'll just. That's the one nice thing about undersizing is you can kind of push the holes back to where you need to be to have everything lined up straight as you continue to open them up.
I'm curious, Frank, are you or anyone on the team doing anything as far as wing risers on the 22X-4?
Yeah, so I do raise my wing on two wheel quite a bit. It's 4 millimeters.
Mm-hmm.
RC Life makes a carbon plate that's basically, it's actually two 2mm plates that raises the wing. And that seems to work really, really nice and be super clean. So I've been using that on my 2-wheel for a while, both carpet and clay.
Got it.
But not on 4-wheel. All right, so now we got everything's pretty straight. So just open up the holes more until they go over the nubs on the wing mount. Like I said, I mean, we're going to the nth degree here.
Frank's
I'm building this car. I'm building this car literally like I'm going to race it next week.
No, I can tell. These are all the little details. Like if I'm getting ready for a big race, these are all the things that you do.
Yeah.
And it may sound silly, but when you take the time to do this kind of stuff, you just feel like you're that much more prepared. And I think it does have some small carryover when you go out onto the track, that it's like, you know that you've done everything. This car is ready to race this weekend. There was nothing left untrimmed, prepared. And I think it is important that in certain races that it's good to do this stuff.
I mean, I think there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I think that when you know that your car is at the best level that it can be at, then it just takes that worry, right? Like out of your mind, and you're just fully confident. And then it allows you to focus on your driving. And that's really the key. So we got our wing here. I pulled off that overspray film, and now I'm just going to use some like brown Scotch-Brite and just kind of scuff it up. I know some guys still like painting their wings. Personally, I don't like the painted look myself. And then I use Scotch-Brite because I don't like the wing to be like very reflective. So as the car is moving around the track, like lights bouncing off the wing, off the smooth surface when it goes past different lights or different bumps. And for me, it's just kind of distracting. So, and sometimes when the light's the right way, you don't even see the wing. So it just looks way more consistent for me when you scuff it. And I try and scuff like in a little bit of a circle pattern, so you don't really get scuff marks one direction or another. One nice thing about scuffing your wing too is after you run some and it gets maybe not look super clean, you just re-scuff it again on the outside especially, and it almost looks new.
I'm so glad you said that. I was like, that's the primary reason why I do it, is you can get, it will look the same longer. As long as you don't like crease it or totally destroy it, you can just re-scuff it and it looks great.
Yeah. And then I'm going to move the rag here out of the way so you guys can see. But I'm scuffing the wing on the inside also. I scuff both sides, the inside and outside. And you only need to scuff one side to be able to see it with the scuffs. But I scuff both sides for that reflection factor I was talking about.
It's just, it's more faster that way, for sure.
Yeah. So, all right. Got the wing scuffed, ready to go. Going to go ahead and drop it here on the back. And we have our wing spacer here. So we have this wing spacer. It's kind of a wedge shape. So it's 2-degree wedge, and the mount itself has 2 degrees of angle built into it. So if you use the wedge, 2 + 2 is 4. If you turn it around the other way, 2 - 2 is 0. Generally, I'm not running this on 4-wheel. I actually just run the wing straight on. So I run the 2-degree and then put your mount on top. And that is another good upgrade. It's a few bucks, but getting the carbon wing spacer that goes on top. That does come with the Elite kit, but it does not come with the 22X-4. So with these, it's really important. Like, these never really need to get like tight. In fact, you actually want to leave them not even snug. I leave mine loose. So what I do is I get them kind of where they're getting tight, and then I'll back them back off. What you want is you want to be able to have a rack that, maybe hits on the wing, and if they're tight, it'll stay, and so it'll be off to the side or crooked. If you leave them loose, it'll just return back, and then it also keeps the mounts from getting twisted over time if you just crank them down, because you're always tightening them the same direction. So your mounts will end up just getting kind of twisted off to one side. So we got that. We have our last little item here out of the normal build, and this is the front scoop. And again, I scuffed this. It does come with the overspray film on it, so I'm going to take that off. And one of the nice things about the front scoop is that it already has the hole actually drilled in it, because there's only, you can't really mount it forward or backwards. So we just have the hole pre-drilled. So it just fits right in with no drilling needed.
It's one of those things that's always so small, and I hate cutting them out. So just the fact that you already pre-cut it out, it's just like, man, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. When it comes to a lot of the stuff that we work on, I race these cars every week myself. I feel the same way about having to assemble these sorts of things. So yeah, does it cost a little bit more to have it pre-cut? Yes, but man, it's just so much nicer for me. I know I enjoy racing more with all of the kind of little things taken care of like that. And I figure everybody else probably would also. So same thing here. I'm going to scuff both sides, inside and outside. All right. So this little guy goes right here in the front, fits between the shocks. You can kind of see it there. And then you just have the short 4mm screw here, and that threads right into the gearbox. And again, it's not a ton of threads, so make sure you don't kill it with the old power driver. Just kind of get it tight by hand. And then you can see that it fits on there. Let's see here. Let's go full screen. That'll be easier real quick. So it fits in here between the shocks, sits nice and flush, and then you can still go under it and get to the screws for the gearbox. So you can go ahead and take the front diff out without having to take the front scoop off. It'll actually come off with the diff cover. So last thing we're going to do real quick, we're going to definitely open it up for questions, because we're going to have a little bit of time while I glue the tires. But I just want to show you guys gluing tires. I'm going to put those on my car, and then we'll end this video. So if you have any questions for myself or for Ryan, please ask them now. It's the go time for questions.
Looks like Hunter fired one in there. He says, so Frank, what do you think about a lightweight kit of parts? For example, tie screws, ball studs, turnbuckles, etc., just so you don't need to buy them all separate.
So TLR, at least, we don't make titanium screws. We used to in the past, and we didn't sell enough to justify the order quantity and the cost, at least for us. So we don't do tie screws. Now, as far as doing like a complete kit, like turnbuckles, nuts, composite gears and stuff, we could probably do something like that. But when you have something that's more packaged like that, you end up selling that many, because there's only so many people that want every single thing in there. And once somebody buys one, they never need to buy it again. They'll usually, if they break a turnbuckle, they might buy a turnbuckle kit, but they're not going to buy the whole setting in. So you might sell a few up front, but you don't sell a whole lot long term. All right, so here's the transponder. I did the same thing where I put the tape on and then did the black Sharpie around the edges. And then I'm just going to grab the corner here of the red tape and peel it off. Looks like the video struggling a little bit on the old iPhone.
Yeah, I think you're dropping quite a few frames here. It looked like the other two feeds were fine.
Jumped off the Wi-Fi and went on cellular. Let's see if it improves.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit. All right, so rectangle here, right? That perfectly fits the transponder. So you just kind of line it up. I definitely need both hands available for this. So definitely just line it up and drop it on. and it'll fit right in there. And then I just take my wire here and I run it underneath the wire from the speed controller and then back over and in the auxiliary channel. So it just sits nice and under it like so. And that's it. That's all the wiring done.
Nice.
All right, so let's see what kind of questions we have while I get these tires going.
Yeah, we got one from Austin. It's another diff question. He says, center diff, center slipper. When would be the best for 13.5? I think he means what would be the best for 13.5. You can definitely run either. Technically, obviously they'll work. What would be best? It seems like the slipper is a little bit lighter. So if you're looking for something that's maximum efficiency, lots of punch, I've heard Frank say that that's the way to go. I personally run the gear diff on like the outdoor tracks just because I like the way it feels on those looser conditions. But I would say just try them both if you can and see which one you like better. But it probably will arguably be the majority is going to like the slipper for the 13.5 is what it sounds like.
I think that's, I agree with everything you said.
Right on. Steven Nelson is asking, what does the Sharpie on the sides do? Sharpie on the sides.
Of the tape.
Oh, Sharpie on the sides of the tape. Oh, if that's what he's referring to, that was just to kind of clean up the look. Because if you are, if the ESC is sitting on the chassis and you can kind of see a little bit from the side, it just kind of looks weird when you see like the black carbon ESC plate and then black casing and then this little like gray line in between. So just to make things look uniform and match the color, he's doing the Sharpie around the edge there. Just the details, man. The details.
Yep. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just taking my tires, I'm punching holes in the sidewall, and I basically punched 2 holes and just a medium-sized hole, nothing too crazy. And this just lets the air travel in and out of the tire so they don't get air stuck in it. And I know some guys just run a bunch of holes in the wheels, like maybe 4 holes in the wheel. Some guys run the holes in the middle of the tread. I like to put it in the sidewall, and I also put it on the inside sidewall. So when you're doing like the rear tires here that are directional and they spin this way, you do one on the inside. You got to make sure you do the other on the opposite side so that you have a matching set.
What do we have there? Some clay compound positrons?
Yeah, so I'm gluing up some MC compound electron fronts and positron rears.
Nice.
And these are the tires that I run at OCRC, and that's the place I'll probably run first once all this is over.
Nice.
Hey, you know what I'm doing? I'm mounting up 2-wheel drive fronts. I better grab 4-wheel drive fronts.
I was gonna say something, but I was like, nah, he wouldn't do that.
No, I mount so many more sets of 2-wheel drive tires. I just kind of grab them off instinct.
It's okay.
So, at least I realized before they were completely mounted.
Well, it's all done. Take a picture of the car. Oh no.
Whoops. And this is one of those things where we've been live for like 2 hours now, so I think we're both getting a little stir crazy.
I mean, you're definitely gonna be, feeling it more than me. You're all focused in and doing like 6 things at the same time here.
Well, I got to do another one later today too. So,
Oof.
Yeah. But the next one's going to be fun. It's going to be like radio setup, speed controller settings.
Okay.
We're going to probably put a slipper back in the car just so we can show people how to set a slipper, set the endpoints, camber, ride height, all that stuff that matters.
Okay. Who do you think? Do we know yet?
I don't. It just kind of depends on who's available. I'm going to try and I think it would be good to have Aaron Kaufman on if he's available. But I scheduled him thinking we're going to be done a little sooner with this one. So I'll have to see if he's still available.
Okay. Oh, he's not doing anything. He's playing Rocket League. Come on, Aaron.
Probably. Well, I know he doesn't work today, so that means he should be available. I see him. I got a message on Messenger from Shane Borden, so he might be game. We'll have to just kind of see how it goes.
Okay.
But yeah, I actually have my wife and I are both working from home, and my wife has a couple meetings this afternoon. So I'm going to have to see if I can jump on after her meetings before the live that they're going to do with Barry and Dakota later.
Nice.
All right, so I got my tires here. I got holes punched in all of them. I always take the foam out because I like to just look inside the tire and make sure there's no chunks of rubber or flashing that are kind of sitting in there. And then I have my wheels here. I'm going to go full cam here for a minute. So I have my wheels and I have my tires, and I have a fresh rag, a new one here. And there's on these, there's two sides. There's like a more of an open loop side and a tighter side. I usually use the tighter side. And I'm going to use Simple Green. Now, this is actually like a standard bottle, but this is full concentrate. This is not diluted at all. And I do like using the, I order this one. It's the Industrial Cleaner and Degreaser. So it's even a little bit stronger than just the standard all-purpose Simple Green. And then basically I'm going to take my wheels and I'm going to put the rag like in the groove where the tire mounts, and just kind of spin the tire the wheel all the way around on both sides, fronts and rears. And then as I clean my wheels, I place them with the inside of the wheel up like this on purpose, and I'll show you why in a minute. Now I'm going to take my tires and I'm going to clean them. And I'm going to do the same thing. On the tire, you want to get this surface here, and I try and get in this corner here because that's where all the glue is going to go, between those two surfaces. So I try and kind of get them both. Make my way all the way around the tire on both sides. Now I set my wheels up like that, so now I can take my tire and set it in the wheel, and it'll just stay. That way it doesn't lean and get on the table and pick up any dirt or anything that might be on your pit mat.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, just, I mean, like we all have little things that we do when we wrench. I'm sure if I was watching you build a kit, that I would pick up something where I was like, oh, I like that. That's something I need to try. And that's where, that's why we're doing these videos, so people can learn some of our tips, some of our tricks, some of the things that we found over the years of the hobby, and we learned from other people on, that we can share with them, that can make their participation in the hobby more enjoyable and less painful.
One thing that I don't know if it's just an old habit that I just can't let go of from back in the day, or if it actually does something these days, I'm not really sure, but I always like to punch out the rim hole just a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. Do you do anything to the rims yourself?
I don't. I think on our wheels, they're actually like a moderate size. They're not super tiny.
Okay.
So I leave them as is. If they were smaller, I probably would.
Got it.
So I'm going to take some brake clean real quick and just put a little tiny squirt on the rag. And I am kind of OCD. I cannot stand to have these paint marks on. So I'll just take them off. And usually they come off pretty quick with the tire sauce and the washing that we do. But I take them off because that's just me and my unnecessary OCD. So now I'm pretty much done with the rag and the Simple Green. I can set those off to the side. Now I'm going to take my tires. And again, these are directional, but I already punched the holes in the side and I made sure that those were correct. So all I need to do is make sure that the holes are towards the inside, and I don't really have to pay attention to the direction of the tire because I really can't put it on wrong.
Are we putting them in I know a lot of people refer to this in a couple different ways, but in the forward or the backward direction?
So this will be the right rear. So it'll spin this way.
Okay, got it.
Yep. And then I'll go ahead and I'll put them all on. And I always put them on this way. I always put them on outside of the wheel and push it into the tire. That way the outside bead of the tire never has to pass any foam. So like technically the foam has gone over the inside bead of the tire and it might leave a little bit of foam dust, but the outside bead is the most important one. And I don't like to have the foam pass over it. And again, like is going to make a tire fall off? Probably not, but it just seems like it makes more sense to do it that way. So I do it that way.
Yeah, what he's saying, guys, if you don't quite understand it, if you push it through the other way, you would basically, if you were to lift the edge of the tire up, you would see like blue dust from the insert that would just kind of coat the rubber a little bit. So the theory would be that you could compromise the bond a little bit because there's debris in between the two materials. But like we said, it's not going to be the end of the world. We're just doing every precautionary step to make sure that the tire stays together and does what it should on race day.
Yeah, so here's an example, right? Like if you look inside of the inner bead where we've dragged that foam across there, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there's a little bit of blue speckle, a little bit of few blue dust in there. And is it going to take make the tire come off? Probably not, but I'm going to OCD. And then I'm going to go ahead and use some Proline glue. We have TLR glue, works great. I just have a bunch of the Proline glue and the tips that come with it work really nice. And if you buy super glue more than a bottle at a time, store it in the fridge.
Yes.
Keep it cold and it lasts longer. So I opened up a new bottle and I do have some of these older tire bands that I still have, and they work pretty well. I just keep them at home and I take my Proline ones to the track. So to glue a tire, it's kind of maybe hard to see from that far away. I'll try and kind of hold it up and do this. Basically what I do is I take my thumb and I pull it back. And what I want to do is pull it back far enough that I can get glue in here and I can get glue underneath there. And then I kind of push it in and make sure I get a good bond. And then I just work my way around the tire. So you're both getting that corner and you're trying to get the flat underneath. And you want to put enough glue that all the way around the tire, glue squeezes out from that corner. And you leaves some glue around the tire, between the tire and the wheel. And then I just take the glue straw and just kind of put it in that corner. And you usually don't have to really add any glue, but I just take that glue and just kind of smooth it around the tire and just leave it. And it'll stay pretty clean. It'll have a pretty clean look to it, and it'll keep a good bond there. I know some guys like to wipe the extra glue off. I don't. I mean, if you're like in a rush to make a race, it'll save you, a couple seconds. But otherwise, that's how I glue.
I'm so glad that someone else out there does that, because I see everyone do the wipe it clean method, but sometimes, not every time, what I find is when I don't do that and I leave just that little bit of, I don't know if you call it like a bead of glue that you can visibly see, that you don't get as much like it'll peel back maybe as you run the tire over time. I think that bead helps me out with the longevity of the hold.
Yeah, and I mean, there's that. And then honestly, when I try and wipe the glue off, it usually kind of smears on the wheel, and then the wheel looks all dull, and it doesn't look as clean. So I don't think it holds as well, and I don't think it looks as clean. The only real benefit is it dries faster.
Not to throw anyone under the bus or call anyone out, but I saw a pro driver, ex-world champion. I saw a tire in the pits one time and I looked at it and I jokingly was like, what squid glued that tire up? That thing looks disgusting. And they were like, oh yeah, it's so-and-so over there, Mr. World Champ. And I was like, you're kidding me. And I guess I understand that they've glued thousands and thousands of tires, so they've gotten to the point where they might not care as much anymore. So it's one of those things that Frank errs on the side of, he likes everything to look clean, look nice, because that's the way he wants his car to be. But if you don't care, I guess it doesn't matter that much.
Well, the thing is, I noticed, right? So,
right.
Dino Dan, he used to have this phrase, and he called it the burden of awareness. So if you're aware of these types of things, then it bothers you, and you have to carry the burden. So if you say thank you and somebody doesn't say you're welcome, right? Like if you just don't notice, then it doesn't bother you. But if you notice, then it bothers you. So it calls it the burden of awareness.
Okay.
So what I do is I glue these tires from this direction over. So I'll give them like a minute and then I'll flip them over. And then what I do is when they're drying the opposite side, because I already have the glue on this side, if you leave it upside down on a pit mat or a table, the air can't move freely enough, and it can fog both the wheel, the tire, and the pit mat. So I actually have like a wire mesh rack over here, and when I'm gluing tires at home, I basically flip them upside down and put them on that wire mesh rack, and then that way they always can get plenty of air, and I never get any issues with fogging. And even if I did, it's a white wire rack, so you could never tell.
I like it.
But yeah, I mean, you can usually look at the glue and you can tell when it's getting dry. Like this one's getting dry around the edges. So is it completely dry? No. Is it dry enough not to drip and get stuck to my mat? Yes. So I'm just going to go ahead and get my other side of glue, beat it on here.
I know that I still like to take a trip down to my local hobby shop, and it's just one of those things that I try to buy what I can from them, even though I may have support from other brands and stuff like that. So I always get my double-sided tape, my glue, and just kind of like paint supplies, just like stuff that I go through a lot. And so like I always get my CA glue from my local hobby shop, and it just gives me an opportunity to go down and say hi, what's up to the guys.
That's awesome. How far away is your local hobby shop, and what shop is it?
It is Phil's Hobby Shop in Pinellas Park, Florida. And it's about, like maybe 10 minutes from my house. They've never had a track. Back in the day, they had a slot car track, and my dad and I, we used to race there all the time, and it was really fun.
Slot cars were fun. It's not that they're not fun now. It's just now that you can control steering too. Why not?
Right. Yeah. I would attribute a lot of my throttle control, like learning in my early days, to the days I spent at the slot car track. Like, I would definitely say that.
Yeah. And man, slot cars, everything happens so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in slow motion compared to slot cars, it feels like.
Yeah. Well, I ran the, and they were still fast. What was it? It was the Parma Flexi chassis class with it was like a D16 or a 60D motor. I don't remember. And we ran like the stock car style body on it. So it wasn't the wing cars, the ones where you can just be like full pin the whole time. It just goes around. Yeah. So ours was arguably the slowest version. They were still fast though.
Yeah. All right. So we have the last tire being glued here. Do we have any questions in the chat?
Let's see. Jonathan Gagnon says, no cutting or hole in the inserts? Question mark.
Okay, so with Proline inserts, they're extremely consistent within a batch, but there is some variance from batch to batch. And you do really notice it more with the rear inserts, not as much with the front ones. So these actually, when I put the first tire on the wheel, I gave it a good squeeze and felt it. And these foams feel like they're going to be just right after 2 to 3 packs. So I didn't feel a need to cut or punch. If I give a squeeze and it's pretty firm, I will take it out and I'll either do a V cut or a V cut and punch holes, or sometimes a Z cut. It just depends on how firm the foam feels in that batch of tires. But once I kind of do one or 2 tires out of a batch, I have a pretty good idea what the rest needs.
Agreed.
So it also depends on the track you're going to and how much grip you're trying to create. Like OCRC, the tire wear is pretty low. So I'm probably going to get 7 or 8 runs on these tires before I start racing with them. So if you get the foams like super soft to start, they're not going to last.
Yeah, that's a good note. That's a good point. I know a track that I race at, New Reds. They have like a sealed dirt surface and it's very high grip. And I don't like the way the tire feels when I get it really flat. The car just gets like really edgy and it's like super grabby. So I don't do it necessarily it technically is for grip purposes, but I like to leave the insert alone so that it keeps the shape of the tire a certain way.
Yes. All right, I'm going to do one more thing while our tires are kind of spending a minute drying. I'm going to install the Velcro onto the chassis. So we're going to hold the body on using Velcro. I won't paint the body in the video today. It would just take too long, and you don't want to follow me into my kitchen and then outside and then back inside and then back outside and that kind of would be a pain. But the Velcro, I am going to put the Velcro on the chassis. And the reason why I wanted to do this is I got two tricks. And I think Ryan will probably agree with both of these. One is always use the hook side. So the side that is more like has a plastic feel and less fuzzy on the mud guards, because this side lasts a lot longer and chances are you're going to go through more bodies than mud guards. And technically, this is called hook and loop and not Velcro, because Velcro is like the name brand, like Kleenex. So this is the hook side, we'll call it. And then the second tip is I always use super glue. The adhesive that's on the back of all the Velcro I've ever used is really good, but doesn't seem to last as long as the Velcro itself. So I always put a little bit of glue on the back of mine, and then that way I know when I put them on, they're never coming off.
Yes, yes, and yes.
So, and I usually go like, I don't know, maybe a 1/2 inch from the front and a 1/2 inch from the back. Not right in the corner, but not too far away from it. Kind of about there. And then I'll go ahead and do the other side also. And if you guys have any questions, we're going to be done here in just a minute. So go ahead and ask your questions away.
Looks like we got just a fun one from Austin Schwent. He says, OCD question. Do you put the springs paint up or down?
Okay. So I put the spring paint up. I feel like if it's on the car, that it feels like it's upside down if it goes down. I know some people do that because they think it's less visible, but for me, it just seems backwards. I think if I was like really OCD, I would have to pull the paint off and find some different way to mark it that I couldn't even see.
Okay. Interesting.
But the problem is there's all the different brands of springs, and one of the best ways that for me to tell is the way that different springs are marked. So like ours are marked with paint, a coil down from the top. Like Associated V2 springs are painted at the top coil. The Associated V1s use the shrink tube. The X-ray springs have the laser etch on the end coil. So you can kind of tell what springs they are, not just what rate, but what brand by how they're marked, because everybody has their own way of doing it. So I do like the shrink tube on the AEV2s. Like I cut them super short, so they're really narrow to try and keep those clean. I'm trying to think if I have any just sitting out here that I can show you. I don't think I do.
I don't have any laying around, but I do the same thing with the tubes. Cut them real thin.
Yeah. And then I put a black dot on all the gray ones, because the gray and the gray and the white are pretty close in color.
Yeah.
So it seems to help to, that way I know which one's gray out of the package.
I see.
Right, so we got our car, electronics mounted, all ready to go. We got our tires here. The glue is, pretty much dry. I checked the last tire I mounted, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how I mark them here with a Sharpie. So I have my wheel here, and what I'll do is, I know where the holes are, I kind of mark them between, and I'll put like a number for the set of tires. So like this will just be number 1. And then I draw an arrow for the direction that the tire is going to spin on the car. Some people do like a right front, right rear, left front, left rear, or just an R or an L. I always just do an arrow with the direction. I generally don't feel a need to mark compounds, because I only run, I pretty much only run indoor compounds, and you can always tell the difference between an S3 and an MC. So you can see I have the 2 tires there, both marked number 1 with arrows going the opposite direction. So when I put them on the car, this will be my left front, and this will be my right front, and they'll spin like this.
The arrows are definitely like the easiest thing ever, because you don't really have to think about it. Because like when I did the left rear, left front, all that, I would get it confused like 5 out of 10 times.
Well, because you always end up with that, you have like the left rear, you have the right rear, and then you have the left front and the right front, and it just, I don't know. And the other thing is, like, over in Europe, they do they say front left, front right, rear left, rear right. So it's kind of the backwards order. So it's easy to get confused with all that. But like I said, as long as you know what it means, that's all that matters. So like Dakota does R and L on his. So I know, luckily I know his code well enough that I can keep them going. And then same with these. I'm going to mark these with a number 1. And I usually try to put the marking like further inside the wheel. And I just do that so that it doesn't get cleaned off or it doesn't get scratched off. And then it's not as visible unless I'm looking for it. And I definitely paying attention here on these rear tires since they're directional. You know, this tread is going to spin this way, so I know which way the arrow needs to go.
Do you, as you run the tires throughout the day, do you just keep like a mental tally of how many times they've been run, or do you mark them?
It depends on where I'm at, like what I'm doing.
Okay.
Like at OCRC, it doesn't matter as long as the tread's like the right height. That, you know, kind of like you could feel the tire, you can feel how soft it is or isn't, but it's really about knowing how high the tread is. Some tracks you go to, you really want to keep track because like Hobby Action, for example, the tires are really good, like runs 3, 4, and 5. And then after that, they kind of get worse. And it's more about how many heat cycles or soft cycles they have through them. So for there, it's really important to kind of keep a track of how many runs you have on everything. So yeah, I think it just depends. Carpet, I mark them run by run for sure.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I mean, you can look at the pins for sure, but on carpet, I usually like to keep track. Unless it's like a practice day and I'm just running packs, but like if they're race tires, then I definitely want to keep track. So I didn't measure the turnbuckles before I put them on, so I'm just kind of I'm not setting the camber, but I'm just trying to get it in the ballpark. So I actually had the rear wheel was cambered in so far that the wheel was hitting the ball cup a little bit. So just getting it in the ballpark so that we got smooth diff function. And all right, well, if there's any more questions, feel free to ask me now. Otherwise, I think we're about done with this 22X4 build.
Looks like we got one from Kenneth.
Yeah, go ahead.
He says, what springs would you guys recommend for an option clay and dirt?
So basically we run either the kit springs or associated V2 yellow front, blue rear, or X-ray 3-dot front, X-ray 2-dot rear. So it's kind of like one of those combos seems to be the way that we've gone. Tom, I know Tom at Reedy Race, he actually won on yellow V2 front and the kit rear spring, which is the pink. So that's definitely an option too.
Okay. What about carpet? What are you doing for springs on carpet?
I've gone back and forth between our springs and the associated springs and the X-ray springs. And right now I have X-ray springs on the car.
The 3-dot, 2-dot?
4-dot, 3-dot.
4-dot, 3-dot.
So stiffer all the way around.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, all right. Well, super long video. Thanks guys for being patient. You know, we did a lot, honestly. You know, usually it's the last bag of the kit and there's not that much stuff in it, but when we've done videos before, there hasn't been that much stuff included, right? But that's because we never actually mount electronics in it and actually mount wheels and tires and a wing. And we just kind of say, oh, you just put the wing on and puts a couple screws where the wing's going to go. But today we actually wired up a Speedo. We wired up the fan, the motor, the servo, and basically got the whole thing set up, changed the wires where we needed to. And I think we got a pretty clean setup out of it. We also showed you guys how to mount a set of tires and I really want to thank Ryan for coming on and keeping us company and delaying us lunch.
Of course.
But I think we had a good time, and so thanks, Ryan. Thanks everybody else for watching. And probably later today at some point, I'll come on and we'll do one last video. And that video is going to be what I call the final setup. And it's basically how to get your car ready completely to be on the track. Your ride height, your camber, breaking in your diffs, setting your toe, radio endpoints, setting up your speed controller and everything. So, and that is probably the most important video that we'll actually do, because that kind of stuff matters more about how your car drives than anything we've done so far.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Thank you again, Ryan. Appreciate it very much. And thanks, everybody. We'll catch you soon.
Peace out, guys.